Attendees Policy Committee. This is the first committee of this municipal year, and thank you all for attending. Welcome back to members that have been on the committee before. Thank you for joining us again, and welcome to our new members of this committee. We're looking forward to working with all of you. The meeting today is open to the public, but there are no items on the agenda that contain exempt information. The meeting will be webcast, and the recording will also be available for people to view later on via the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV could record and rebroadcast this meeting. We've received no questions today, no statements or no petitions, and we will go over that again in item 5. Please can I request that all mobile telephones and other such equipment is switched to silent as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from Town Hall staff, and the assembly point is in Tudor Square. I'd like to now go round and ask members of the committee to introduce yourself, and I'll go this way first. Thank you.
Councillor Anne Whittaker, Councillor for West Ecclesfield Ward. Councillor Sue Alston, Councillor for Fulwood.
Councillor Luke Goddard, Councillor for the Burley Ward.
Councillor Tessa Lupton for Ecclesfield Ward.
Councillor Toby Mallinson, Green Party spokesperson, and Hillsborough Ward.
Councillor Rob Bannister and for Grace Park, and I will be Deputy Chair this year.
Thank you, and I'm Councillor Dorndale, Chair of this committee and Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside. We have no apologies for absence today, and as I said previously, there is no items on the agenda that are exempt from access to the public or the press. Does anyone have any declarations of interest on any items of business today's agenda? No, that's a no. Thank you very much. If you could all now turn to page 11 of the agenda pack, and we'll take a look at the minutes from the previous meeting. Thank you. So we'll go through page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. I'm just assuming you've all read these, and obviously it's only the people that were in the previous meeting that can agree them, but page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, and page 12. For those of us that were in the meeting previously, can we agree that these minutes are a true reflection of the meeting that we attended? Thank you, that's agreed. That brings us on to our item 5 and 6, which would have been public questions and members' questions and petitions, where we have no items in this meeting. This then brings us on to page 25 of the work programme, which is item number 7. So if you would all like to take a look at the work programme, I'm hoping that you've all had a chance to read it before. There is a slight change to the protocols in this meeting, where previously I would have asked if any members had got anything that they would like to add to the work programme in this meeting. I'm happy to take, if anyone does have any suggestions, I'm happy to take that outside of the meeting and then have those conversations with officers to maybe potentially put things on the work programme for a later date. So has everybody had a chance to look at the work programme? Yes. Has anybody got any comments or questions on the work programme? Councillor Alston.
Thank you, yes. We were told in a briefing a few days ago that knowledge briefings were no longer to take place, and yet there are several noted on this work programme as being required. Given that we now have a committee system where each member of the committee is equally responsible for the decision rather than a cabinet system, I am going to publicly express my concern that most committee members will not receive the knowledge briefings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alston. Rachel, do you want to feedback?
That's actually an admin error on my part, Councillor Alston. I should have removed the word knowledge briefing from that work programme, and will do so, so that future published work programmes, you know, it won't contain that phrase.
Thank you, Rachel. What I would like to add, though, is with regards to some of these items that do say knowledge briefing, the big items like send reforms commissioning, alternative provision, and the risk outside the home strategy are items that are going to be all member briefings anyway. So this information will come out to all members, of all elected members of this council, as we are all corporate parents. So some of these briefings will actually be for all members. There are going to be items throughout the year that are really big decisions and are really important, and it is important from me as the chair to ensure that all members of this council, not just this committee, are aware of what is happening for our children in Sheffield. So I'll make sure that that is changed. Thank you. Councillor Mallington.
Yeah, I just want to express concern in a similar way to Councillor Alston, but it is just regrettable that we've ended up in this situation. We were working so well last year, and if only we'd continued in that vein, that cooperative vein, it would have helped a lot.
Councillor Goddard.
Yeah, just reiterating what they've said, I think myself and people that are new to this committee would certainly have benefited from a bit of a briefing and background to some of the things that we're expected to vote on today, and that would have been quite helpful.
Sorry. Thank you. If I can just have some clarity. So things have changed slightly because clearly we've got a different system at the moment. Last year we had a three-party coalition administration. This year we're not in that position. So we've taken advice from democratic services and officers, and we're left with the system that we've got now. The commitment I made when we had our briefing last week was to ensure that all members of this committee do feel supported and briefed, and I am happy to have those conversations with members in order for us to be able to make informed decisions. The difference being now is that you don't get officer briefings unless it's an all-member briefing. That doesn't mean that as a committee we can't work together and that we can't go through things together. And we can have as much head shaking as we like and as much nodding along, but anyone who's been on this committee with me over the last 3 years knows just how open and transparent I am. This committee is about ensuring that children in Sheffield get the best outcomes possible, and I will ensure that that happens, and I wouldn't expect anyone, because I don't expect to make any decisions if I'm not comfortable with what I'm making decisions on. So that is my commitment as chair of this committee moving forward. Councillor Mallington.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you, Councillor Dale, for the amazing work that you do in this committee and how you do keep it as non-political as possible. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Mallington. Okay, any more comments on the work programme? No? Okay. So now we move on to agenda item number 8, which is our DCS update report, which is on page 27. And we've got Meredith who will be providing us with this report. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you. I'm Meredith Teasdale, Strategic Director for Children's. This report has been, we've done this each committee over the last 2-3 years. It's an opportunity for information to be given to committee and to the public, which we think is important, and also updates of the area of work that might be going to other committees as well. What we are doing is making sure that it is only things to note within here and nothing decision making. Within here we've got staffing updates. We have got a number of new assistant directors who are joining us. So that's in 1.2. We have promised each committee to give an update on home to school transport. Within here is details of work that's taking place. In future reports, I'm also going to be asking for the number of children who have had independent travel training, and that there has been a change to their travel arrangements to school based on that as well. So that I know that's been one of the questions you've asked as committee is how do you know that independent travel training is having an impact on the way children are travelling to school, and that was something we focused on last year, but it's not in there at the moment, but you will see that there is a large amount of work taking place. We've got the academy conversion programme within here, and the schools that are either waiting and the dates that they are converting, or those that have just recently converted to academies, and we've listed the trusts that they have moved into. We had a early years peer challenge review in May. That's a local government association where people come in from other local authorities to assess and look at what we're doing. We set out what we think the areas are that they need to look at. They found a number of strengths which we knew they would, including how people work together in the early years area, but also some of the areas that we really need to lean into and improve. So that will then form work going forward, and those recommendations will have a plan of how we are going to action those and how that links into the review of the early years strategy as well. We have in the last committee agreed to have a smartphone task and finish group. There's an update on there. There are dates for that to take place as well, and I know Councillor Dale has asked if anyone would want to be part of that who isn't already. Play Partnership is, it came to Council a number of months ago about the importance of Play Partnership within Sheffield. So we've given an update on the work that's taking place around that. And then there is an update on the NEAT strategic plan. This sits within the Economic Development Committee, links in directly to the Melbourne Review, which obviously we will link into as an ECF committee, and also the work that's taking place in that area with the mission opportunity piece of work as well. I'm happy to take any questions, Councillor Dale.
Thank you. Any questions on this? Let me write you all down 1 second. Can I just make a proposal, though, that someone sends out the link to the Melbourne Review to members, so that when we're talking about reviews and reports, and in future, if there are any big reviews, reports, or research, if we can send that out to members, if we're going to refer to it, because then they can have at least seen that, that would be great. Thank you. So if I take Councillor Whittaker and Councillor Alston, and then Councillor Mallinson. Thank you.
Just a couple of things. Where it says young people completing independent travel training during the academic year 12, I don't know why I was expecting that figure to be a lot more. I know we've got 51 that are undertaking it at the moment, so you'd hope that in the next academic year that figure will be a lot higher. My concern is, though, where it's saying 38 young people have been identified as ready to do it. So if you're identified as ready to do it and then you have this really long wait before you start doing it, is that kind of going to cause issues? You know, because you've lost that, perhaps lost that enthusiasm.
So a lot of work's taking place with our special schools as well around this, and the work that they're doing to prepare children for independent travel. So once they're identified, there is work taking place, but then it's about our own teams who are going in. In fact, we had one of the young men doing on an independent travel course coming into our leadership team meeting because he'd independently travelled from his school as part of that work and then arrived at the town hall. So it is going really well. But I agree with you, it's kind of like, how do we actually increase the numbers? But that's also about our special schools who are working on this as well, and it is going well. But it might be something that might be helpful for us to get a written briefing on, which Councillor Dale can then circulate to everybody, if we can just understand the questions that you have, and then we can get something sent out to you as well.
We talk about when we had children and young people that were on a reduced timetable, and so we had a lot more single-use taxis. We're saying we've got a revised approach to part-time timetables. So is this, we were going to go back to schools and we were going to say, look, it's not our statutory duty, you pay it. And we were talking that potentially the schools might say, oh, well, we're going to increase to full-time, and then the council pays. So is that a mixture of schools taking that responsibility? So how's that, you know, well, they're taking over the full costs of part-time timetables, how's that working?
So we've worked hard with schools around that, and most schools now are taking on the responsibility of part-time timetables. There has been some conversations with our special schools where there's been a particular medical reason why a child's on part-time timetable, and we've had a slightly different conversation around that. We have seen a reduction in the use of single-use taxis, so we're still not yet in line with our core cities and our statistical neighbours around use of single-use taxis, but that has dropped dramatically, and more children are on fleet. So it is, we are slowly moving in the right direction, but that's part of the work that will continue over this year, is how we make sure that we are adhering to our policy.
Thank you, Meredith. And just on that note, though, I think it is really important that our schools are working with our young people to make sure they are in school full time. So it's not just about the transport. We want our children in with the right support in school full time. So there's that piece of work going on alongside that as well. Thank you. Councillor Alston.
Thank you. Couple of, well, one's more a comment than a question, but firstly, is it the intention that we'll be provided with regular updates on the challenges that came out of the peer review and on progress? I mean, I would hope so, and I'm sure that's, I would just like to put that on record. My other question is more specific around the reduction in the use of single-use taxis, which is certainly a positive. But obviously there was quite a lot, I think there was quite a lot of resistance from parents and concern from parents. And I just wondered whether any systematic sort of feedback has been gathered from those parents with the changes and how they feel about it. I think part of the work around the independent travel training is giving confidence to parents around how their children are travelling. And actually what we've found going through the process is that the changes have been received better than I think there was the anticipation. I don't want to touch wood here. So, I mean, obviously each child, it's very different, and parents' relationship with their child, with the person who's transporting that child is, you know, and that's got to be key, is that you've got faith in the people that are taking your children to school. But the changes have also been supported by schools, so those conversations have been triple locked in that sense, so that it's not just some strange person from the travel world having a conversation. It is about how collectively we're supporting children to be on fleet with their peers. And around the reviews, yes, through Councillor Dale, we'll make sure that there are regular briefings, because there's also the Send Improvement Board, and it's important that you're updated on that as well.
Thank you, Meredith. Councillor Manningham.
Thank you, Meredith. Firstly, I am a beneficiary of travel training. My son, who's now in his 20s, benefited from that 10 years ago, and I absolutely concur. It's as much the parental confidence often as the child's confidence, because it's only us in our case. I've just got a comment about some of the things, and then a couple of two questions. Just want to really welcome the Not in Education Employment Training strategic plan. That's looking good. And also, maybe even more, welcome the commitment to the Sheffield Play Partnership, and looking forward to the all-member play session. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the sand pit and so on. But the questions are around the travel arrangements, which was a big thing last year, and it's in the middle of rollout. So there's going to be parents who are have been used to travel training, been used to homeschool transport, and they're going to be hitting the sort of post-16 and suddenly being asked to fund it, or make a contribution. It's not funding it at all for me, but make a contribution of about, I think it's £1,000 a year. There is an element of income assessment on that. So some people will continue to get access to it. But obviously there's lots of things put in place to try and encourage them to not need to use it, such as parental payments from the council to the parents to make their own arrangements, and also travel training. So, do we have any indication that there's going to be any sort of backlash in September? So that's one question. Okay. And then the second question is about picking up on what Councillor Whittaker was saying about sort of how early travel training starts. Just want to be reassured that travel training is an agenda item on all EHCP annual reviews in schools for youngsters, so that it's at least there, even if the youngster is not appropriate for that youngster, it is considered for anyone who might be able to gain some independence. Thank you.
So the implementations that you agreed last year are already in place. Again, I don't want to sort of, so that they've landed relatively well, and we've worked hard with partners around that. So the college have been supportive. So a lot of children will be going to Sheffield College at the age of 16. And so not only have we, you agreed a policy, there's also the college that put in place and support young people through a range of different means. So they've got a very strong pastoral process, which again can identify where perhaps families would be struggling with the cost if they hadn't met the threshold that we set. Around EHCPs, there's a considerable amount of work taking place around education, health and care plans. We have increased the size of the CENSAR team. A lot of work is taking place around a relational approach. We still, and this will come through in the performance information as you receive it as committee, still our turnaround of and timeliness of EHCPs in 20 weeks and also our annual reviews is not where we would want it to be, but we do understand what the issues are, where they are, and have put in place things to address that. The reason I'm labouring that point is absolutely independent travel training in that question is part of EHCPs. The weakness in the system is, are we actually getting to every child in the timely way that we would want to have those conversations? So in 18 months, 2 years' time, it will absolutely be a foolproof way to have that conversation as part of the annual review. We're doing other things as well at the moment to make sure that we're identifying those children who need to have independent, or who it would be good for them to have independent travel training, and that's partly those conversations with special schools and with other schools where there are integrated resource hubs as well. So both, but yes, the answer simply is yes, but we couldn't just rely on that as a process at the moment, and we're fully aware of that. And I'm looking over there because we've got our very new AD for SEN, Joe Laidlaw, who is not single-handedly, but leading that piece of work, which is making those changes which are so important.
Yeah, and any sort of potential risk of some sort of parental backlash in September?
I tried to answer that. Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that. So.
Thank you, Councillor Mallinson. I have had conversations with parents regarding this, and we are putting everything. There was some misunderstandings about what this would look like, and people feeling that they were going to have to pay it all up front. That's not the case. There's either a termly option or an option to pay a monthly payment rather than having to pay it all up front. Obviously, we raised the threshold anyway, so some parents that were paying the 500 and something might not end up paying anything at all. And there was also some clarity that I've had to get around if you've got more than one child who is using transport, how would you have to pay for both? And you don't. You pay, one family pays one fee. So if you've got 3 children who are in special education using transport, you pay one fee, and it's not going to be £3,000 for a year, it's going to be one. So we're keeping an eye on it. Parents are coming and asking questions, but I think I feel that officers are managing it really well and making sure that parents are getting support if they feel that they are going to be impacted financially. They're being signposted to the services that can support with that as well. So if anyone does get any casework on this though, please let us know and then we'll pick that up and support those families. Thank you. Any more questions on this item? Councillor Bannister.
More of a statement than a question, to be honest. As somebody who's in front of a special school, picking up and dropping off most days of the week, anecdotally, what we're doing has definitely worked. The single-use taxi is drastically reduced. They used to be all over the road, now they're really a lot more limited, people coming in on buses. From the feedback I'm getting from the parents within the sort of SEN community, when we first got this piece of work, it came to us pretty much as a cost-saving measure. They were scared. We turned it around into a really positive piece of work, and from what I can see, people are really getting on with it. Both of my kids are currently going through travel training. The way they ramped them into the programme was really beautifully gentle. We have meetings at school, we have meetings at our home. They built that relationship before they even considered taking them out into the wild. And we have the guarantee that we put in during this process that no child will lose their taxi or their minibus if they're simply not ready for travel training or they have some sort of medical need that stops it from working properly. So, yeah, all in all, I think it's, yeah, it really is working. It's working nicely.
Thank you, Councillor Bannister. It's good to hear from the horse's mouth when someone's actually using that service, how well it's going. So thank you for that. So on this report then, it's just to note that the Strategic Director of Children's Services report, which includes key activity for the coming months, are we all in agreement to note this report? Thank you very much, everyone. We all agree. So that takes us now on to agenda item number 9, which is on page 39 of your pack, and this is the Alternative Provision Framework, and I've got Steve Kay and Dana Cummings presenting today. Thank you. Oh, and Pat Butcher is here. Oh, yeah, as well. Thank you. So we have got presentations coming on screen as well, if anybody wants to follow them. Thank you. Okay, would you like to fire away then? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Dana Cummings, Strategic Lead for Alternative Provision across the local authority. I'd just like to set the scene using this PowerPoint, if I may. We're here to look at alternative education provision. And just to give you an overview of how that works here in Sheffield, in our city, currently we have a framework of 50 providers who offer a range of differing educational opportunities for young people across the whole of the city of Sheffield. A few who sit on the fringes, on our Derbyshire border and also on our Barnsley border, and schools are able to procure those services through our team, and we have oversight of that provision and that education packages that are put together for those young people. So just wanted to give that city overview. That's currently how we are working. So currently we have a framework that's been in place for the last 3 years, and that is coming to an end. And we are coming to committee to look at getting a decision around the continuation of that framework being extended, the potential of the framework being extended particularly for 6 months, to enable us to procure the services that we need ready for September, bearing in mind that it is now, we're now towards the end of June, that we don't want to disrupt the placements that we have for young people across the city. And that's the main reason for us being here at committee today. The purpose of this really around this is around being able to secure that continuation of education provision for young people across the city. And the scope of that is that alternative provision, we are in the process of developing a citywide strategy for alternative provision that will look at enabling us to be more joined up with our partners around within the local authority and beyond, and with our partners in commissioning to deliver a more upstream service in terms of alternative provision, that alternative provision will be part of a young person's educational journey much earlier, and that we would be able to do that upstream work much earlier, and also to develop those partnerships across the city. Part of that also is the strategic and financial significance. You will see within your packs that there is a cost marker of 7 million for that over the next 2 years. If I may break that down slightly, that part of the service is a traded service, so 5.1 million of that expected spend over the next 2 years would come through a traded service. So that would not be an expectation for the local authority to find that money. The gap would be the other 1.9 million, which really equates to the work that we're doing with children who have been excluded, children who are in need of a specific education package outside of school, and therefore that is where the local authority would pick up that cost. So we are not coming to committee to say that the cost to the local authority would be 7 million. The actual cost, real terms cost, would be 1.9 rather than 7 million. The reason behind this is the rise in demand for alternative education. As you, I will not make any assumptions, but we have seen a demand for and an increase for young people accessing such provision, either for step-outs of schools and to support schools to engage and to re-engage students into mainstream provision. Also, we've seen an increase in the number of young people who have been excluded in our city, which, again, we're working in partnership to address that. It's not just an alternative provision issue, but it is a citywide issue that we take responsibility for. And also to continue to support young people who require an alternative to accompany their mainstream provision. There have been a number of changes in the capacity around that, so again that has driven the increase, and we have seen the need to try to ensure that young people have a good quality education mapped out, including alternative provision, but our main aim is around reintegration, and we're working more closely with our partners to look at reintegration and how we can do that better across the city. A big part of the strategic overview in terms of the AP strategic plan for the city is to really strengthen those pathways, to develop a real strong, clear pathway of alternative provision across the city, and also to support that reintegration of pupils. We are really wanting pupils to be in their school every day as far as possible. So that is part of our aim, to ensure that those vulnerable pupils are accessing a full-time education, and to also recognise that alternative provision is an intervention. We are not a destination, so therefore we are there to help with those interventions to support schools as they continue to engage with students. This, one of my final slides, I think this is, just gives a bit of a visual view of what alternative provision has looked like over the last 3 academic years. If I could just talk you through it, maybe it might be helpful, because I don't know how well you can read that from here. So we've got the blue column, which is the number of providers that we, no, let me go, I'm going the wrong way around. So, sorry, blue is the number of students that are accessing alternative provision across the city, and you can see there has been a steady increase. The orange column is the number of placement days that equates to across the city, and you can see the increase in there. The green column is the increase in providers. So if we go back 3 years ago, we had in the range of 21 providers. We currently have 50 providers sitting on the framework offering alternative provision to students and young people across our city. Finally, just things around maintaining that alternative education, just to give you some oversight. So that increase has gone from sort of 350 to 450 pupils that requiring alternative education. It falls within our statutory compliance around inclusion to make sure that students are included, specifically our vulnerable cohorts. Improving the quality and coordination of AP is part of our wider strategy, that we have quality provision that students and young people can access, and we're also making that join up across our partners in SEND, health and social care, and also really looking for a real system redesign that would give us a real coordinated approach to meet the needs of students in our city.
Thank you, Dana. Before I ask members if they've got any questions, can I just ask for something to be noted on this? When we're being asked to look at finances, can it be clearer in the report? Because there's nothing in the report that says that only £1.9 million of this ask is from the council, and at no point have I been briefed on that. And we had this conversation last week. We were asked to look at the 7 million. So in future in reports, can we just have that broken down so that members are aware of actually what we're looking at? Thank you, Meredith.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we do that, and that 1.9 is from dedicated school grant as well, so it's not from the general fund of the council. It is the dedicated schools grant, which is specifically there for children. So just a quick, if I do a quick piece around dedicated schools grant, so money comes in from central government. There are three blocks of dedicated schools grant. One is schools, and that money flows straight out to schools. One is early years providers, and that flows straight out to early years providers. There is work that takes place around the formulas for both of the school and the early years work, and that sits predominantly in the school, in the education funding forum. The third block is high needs block. High needs block funds our children with special educational needs, including our children who are excluded from school and alternative provision. We do have a statutory duty to make sure children excluded from school are in provision. We also, and that is, and some of that fits into this, but that dedicated schools grant is separate from the general fund. So when we ever talk about the general fund, this is not part of it. This 1.9 is part of a separate set of money.
Thank you, Meredith, and I'm happy to meet with members that aren't aware of how everything's funded over here to have that conversation with them and let you all know so you're well prepared. Thank you for that. So, over to members. Do I have any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Lupton, Councillor Goddard, or everybody? Okay, we'll start with Councillor Lupton and we'll work our way around. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. I'd just like to say as well, thank you for being so welcoming to me and other members coming in this committee. It is a difficult situation this year with the changes, and I'd just like to acknowledge that you have been very welcoming and open and willing to meet and support members, so I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. A question is, our schools and nurseries and other providers are watched over by Ofsted. My question is, why are the alternative provision providers not regulated by Ofsted, and how do we make sure that children that are in these provisions are getting the help and support that they need? Also, what more could be done in schools to sort of prevent children ending up in alternative provision? Will the new SEND reforms help with that? Is there going to be more funding? Because, like Dawn said, we want our children to be in school, but I also recognise that school is not a happy place for most children, and not all pegs fit in the same hole. So I can see that there is place for an alternative provision that isn't a mainstream school. But yeah, just what more support is there? What can we do? Thank you.
I think if I answer the first part, and I think Steve will come in on the second point. So the first part is, yes, we did have a system that was, most of the providers on the current network are what we call unregulated providers. Therefore, we've put in a compliance system to ensure that those providers are compliant, and also to look at the quality of education that they're actually providing. So we've implemented that over the last 2 years. So there is quite a stringent process in terms of due diligence and compliance and quality assurance that is continuing to go on. So we've currently done self-assessments with providers. Every current provider has an action plan that we are working towards with them around quality and raising that. So there is actually a criteria, if I could use that as a way to describe it. It's not just that providers come on and they can just do as they please. That is regulated and that is watched over the entire time that they're on the network. To remain on the network, they have to be compliant at all times in terms of health and safety, all the elements that you could imagine that can come into that in terms of compliance. And quality is the other thing that we've just implemented over the last 18 months, looking at quality of provision as well.
Sorry, can I just ask a quick follow-up? So you just mentioned about self-assessment, but are those providers, have we got officers or people from the council actually going in to do spot checks and support from an external body, not just them looking at it themselves, is that right?
Absolutely, we do have, so that's part of the process. Along with that, you may or may not know that there is the voluntary standards that the DFE have talked about for unregulated AP, so we're working very much in line with that to raise the standards that we have across Sheffield as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Luxon, so in terms of the second element of the first question around what do we do with schools, it's really important. Interesting to note is only a head teacher can exclude a child. So we've got to work, excuse me, we've got to work really closely with head teachers and also multi-academy trust and chief executives as well. 92% of our exclusions are in secondary, where the vast majority of our schools are in multi-academy trusts. So we've got to work really closely with them. New guidance has come out this week in relation to building on the school's white paper, specifically in relation to inclusion bases and inclusion more generally. We've had a number of meetings recently where we're working through with multi-academy trust chief executives around how the wider wellbeing system, so everything that sits outside of the school, is wrapped around to support at the earliest possible opportunity. And also for schools, in addition to that, schools are receiving, I think there's an additional around 3 million that's coming into the city, excuse me, specifically for schools. So it's directly going into schools around inclusion. It's not a huge amount of money when it's split across all of the schools in order to be able to deal with it. I think what's really important is that we see inclusion not just as a schools issue but as a whole system challenge that we've got. And what Dana's doing in relation to this framework is ensuring that when children are excluded that they have the right support. And then what we're doing in relation to the development of the strategy, which we are doing with schools themselves, is that the reintegration, when children go into alternative provision, that there's a route back, because very often they end up staying for a disproportionately long amount of time or permanently within alternative provision. And what it should be is a graduated approach. So the SEND reform, which you'll hear an element about today, we're looking at ordinary or available provision within schools. We're looking at a graduated approach to offer support to young people. It's not just about SEND, but SEND is, young people with SEND are disproportionately represented within the excluded cohort. So we're doing an awful lot of work with that, and also the inclusion bases that exist within schools and more being developed. It's important that they're seen as an intervention of support and rather than somewhere to place a child. So it's complex, but the route forward for us is to develop that strategy, to continue to work closely with schools and multi-academy trust, and that it remains without blame, because actually there's different elements of the system that need to connect more coherently in order to do that. So massive amount of work going on in this area. We're not where we need to be as a city, like any other core city, in relation to this, hence the reforms. But we are working really closely with those schools.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, and yeah, I'd just like to echo what Councillor Lupton was regarding yourself, Councillor Dale, about your welcome to the committee, and just the way that everybody does actually seem to want to work together, which is obviously going to be really beneficial moving forward. So I've got two lines of questioning really, and forgive me if I've misunderstood anything, obviously being new to this. So I've written my questions to be as specific as possible, so again, sorry if any of this sounds a little bit scripted. The report states that the existing commissioning decision is to be extended by 2 years and 3 months from July, while also indicating that new contracts are expected to commence from September. Can officers clarify how these timelines align in practice, and in particular if the new arrangements are intended to begin from September, what's the purpose of extending the current commissioning decision beyond that point, and why is a full 2 year, 3 month extension required rather than a shorter transitional period? And also, given the urgency of ensuring that provision doesn't come to a sudden halt, would it not have been more prudent for this to have come before the committee more than 5 days before it expires? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. I'll take the last part first, if I may. Absolutely, would have been prudent to have got this here earlier. Unfortunately, a number of constraints on our end as officers, not on your side. So apologies for that, and apologies to councillors for that. The decision to extend for that period of time, it aligns with when we also would like to see the overall AP strategy of the city implemented. So it's in line with supporting that during our transition to give us stability for those students who still require what we currently have, whilst we also move forward and look at the model that we may want to work to as we move forward.
Go on, sorry, Mary.
So part of the reason that there was a delay in this is that there was a bit of a debate between ourselves and the legal team. I think this is right, about whether this did need to come to committee or not. And the decision was taken fairly late in the day that it did need to come to committee. So it is one of those lessons learned that we need to have some of those conversations earlier on. And you're absolutely right to point it out, Councillor Goddard. And we will make sure that we do better.
Great, thank you. So obviously we've heard about this 1.9 million of council funding now, which changes some of these figures, but I'll go with the original word and obviously just apply based on what we've heard. But if the value of the framework increases from 750k to 3.5 million a year, it's been met from within existing school resources. What assessment have council officers made of expecting schools to finance this, whilst also maintaining existing resources? Or could an unintended consequence be that other provisions are cut, such as teaching assistants, or even some alternative provisions end up being rationed, which would disproportionately impact vulnerable groups? And can you also clarify how these costs are expected to be distributed across schools in practice? In particular, is the financial impact expected to fall evenly across all schools, or will it be concentrated among those with higher levels of need and send pressures? And at what point within the 2 years and 3 months is the anticipated value of the framework expected to multiply by 4 from 750k a year to 3.5 million per year? And if that jump is immediate, then surely the earlier spoken of 7 million only covers 2 years exactly, and not the additional 3 months. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. In terms of the costing, schools currently pay per student who accesses alternative provision, and schools will use differing budgets to do that. Our aim is to be more upstream with the work that we do in alternative provision, meaning that students would be using alternative provision in a much more time-limited process, therefore not extended periods of being in alternative provision for a year or 2 years. Therefore, actually, we see that as a reduction in cost to schools, actually, if the interventions are working and that reintegration is happening. Part of that is working also with our partners in SEND. We know that disproportionately, children who have SEND need are disproportionately represented across some of our AP figures. So again, actually, if we're getting that intervention right, actually that cost should come down for schools and there would be better reintegration in the long term. That is the aim that we're working towards, which is why we at present don't see the bigger picture for schools. I know on schools' budget, but for example, we have no intention of increasing any of our prices that we use and the pricing structure that we currently have for alternative provision, and we are looking at how we work with schools to develop their internal resources around that. I think Steve Kay referenced that in terms of doing further work with schools around what schools can do to prevent those young people actually having to be outside of that school environment.
Just coming back on your point on the pressures on the school budget, completely understand that school budgets are tight and quite tightly balanced as well. There is a cost to this. There's a cost to this with school, but there's also a financial cost in kind of supporting these students one-to-one in school, etc. So all those decisions are kind of, from my experience in working in schools, taken very carefully. Many schools will look at this cost and balance this cost and look at whether they can meet that kind of alternative curriculum rather than provision in school. And we've seen a growing increase in numbers of schools actually taking this kind of support in-house. I think some of that will be developed as part of the alternative provision framework going forward.
Sorry. To a certain extent, this is a stopgap to get us from A to B, and actually it is cheaper for children to be in school and not to be excluded from school. And what we're wanting to do, and part of what we're setting out as a recommendation, is that the alternative provision strategy, which we need to have, working with particularly our secondary schools, our secondary sector, our multi-academy trust CEOs, is how do we prevent the high number of exclusions that we have in the city. And we have a far higher number of children excluded from school in Sheffield than other core cities. So the cost is greater than it would be in another core city. So this is kind of like, how do we get from A to B, whilst over the next 2 years we actually recalibrate the system to make sure that children aren't being excluded at the rates that they are currently being excluded, and we've got some of those preventative measures in place as well. Some of this will relate to the paper that Joe Laidlaw is bringing around SEND reforms and the experts at hands, and all of it kind of mixes together. But for the purposes of committee, we're bringing separate reports on each of them because there's specific asks.
Thank you, Meredith. And just on that, this is going to be one of the areas that will be an all-member briefing so that everybody can understand how all of the separate flows of work that are happening actually culminate in the education strategy that link into the SEND reforms, that link into inclusion, that link into alternative curriculum. So we are intending to bring this to all members because it's helpful for you in your wards as well when you meet with parents, so you can try and understand it. So we will be doing that. Have you got any follow-up questions, Councillor? Oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry, I just suddenly realised I said, and it's cheaper, it's also better outcomes for children if they stay in school. Sorry, I just realised I was just talking about the money, but it is better outcomes as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. I suppose it's just going right back to the wording of it at 7.2 on page 52. And it says the anticipated value of the framework will increase from 750 to 3.5 million. So I keep hearing that it's going to be cheaper for schools, it's going to be cheaper for schools. But it says right in that point that this provision will be funded through the school system and the schools will need to manage within their existing resources. So I'm just wondering, how is that cheaper for schools? I can't quite understand that, sorry.
So it's not at the moment. So in that sense, this is about making sure that there are enough places for children who are currently being excluded. So schools will need to build into their budgets, if they are excluding children, that they will need to, and that prior piece of work. And they already have that within their budgets. Yes, budgets are tight, but actually schools, there is that funding and that decision that the chair of governors and the head teacher will make. I do agree with your point that there is a disproportionality as well. So there are some schools that are in some of our most disadvantaged areas where there are higher exclusion rates. We're working with those schools specifically, but also the funding formula that comes in means that those schools actually get slightly more money in the system as well. So there are kind of things that support that, and again, through Councillor Dale, we'll make sure that you've got some of that detail. But this is the sort of now, where we are now, which is not where we would want to be. And we know that also from our SEND inspection, which highlighted alternative provision and the level of exclusions of being an area that we have to improve on as a city. So this is, I suppose this is the stopgap, and yes, it will cost. It is costly. What we want to get to is where we've got less cost and better outcomes for our children, and and part of that is about having an alternative provision strategy that is really strong and held by all partners in the city, and that we're doing work around behaviour and social, emotional, mental health prior to a child needing to be excluded. And some of that comes down to speech, language and communication. We know that in primary school, the greatest need, primary need for special educational needs is speech, language and communication. In secondary, it's social, emotional and mental health. Well, actually, there is probably an issue with communication going right the way through, and as soon as children aren't communicating and engaging with the curriculum, then there are issues that then translate into school behaviour in schools. And the highest level of exclusions is persistent behaviour issues rather than one big event. And so again, what are we doing to wrap around that? So it's a journey at the moment, and this is one stage in the journey.
Sorry, just one last follow-up. More of a statement, I suppose, than a question, but my understanding of it is then that even if this is only a stopgap, that we're still expecting schools to absorb all this extra cost, and that is going to disproportionately impact the schools with the most SEND pupils, which means that provisions would go down and not up. That's what I'm hearing.
So they do get more money, and I suppose my provocative argument would be, well, if you kept the child in school, then you wouldn't need to fund this. So that's a slightly provocative answer. But there is 1.9, so all of it comes from dedicated schools grants. So there is money that's within the school budget that comes from dedicated schools grant that will pay for those children who they want to have alternative provision for to meet their needs. And then there is 1.9 million which is coming from the local authority side of the dedicated schools grant. So not all of it is met by schools. There is a percentage which is met by the local authorities part of the dedicated schools grant. But I think what you're raising is absolutely the right questions, because actually this is a resource costly way of us doing education. It would be far better to have our children in school and wrapping around that school and keeping children in school, and that's the direction that we as a city are going on and want to go on, because it's both better for the child and better for the budget.
Councillor Alston.
Thank you, and I'm glad to hear you say that we're going to have an all-member briefing on this, because I am now so confused about the money. I don't really know what we're doing here. So we are being asked to agree to continue a contract or programme that's already in place for another 2 years. I'm just reiterating so I've got this straight in my head. With the view that, as somebody's said in answer to a question, we will have a new model at the end of that 2 and a bit years to introduce, which sounds good and sensible. It does feel this is a bit of a Hobson's choice, because if we don't vote for it, then what happens? We're not really being given a choice about voting for it, are we? But I have 2 main concerns. One, I'm completely confused about the money. I don't understand. So 1.9 million of this 7 million that we need for this programme is coming from the LA Schools grant. I don't know where the other 5.1 million, whatever it was, is coming from. I'm completely confused about that. I also want to reiterate, which I think Councillor Lupton raised right at the beginning, that I am very concerned that most of these places are not registered with Ofsted. And I wonder what Ofsted is doing that they're not registering them. I mean, are they known to Ofsted? Is it that Ofsted hasn't got the time to go and visit them? Is it that they're not wanting them to go and visit them? You know, what is actually going on to stop that? And my third point is just probably quite a trivial point really in the scheme of things, but on the graphs that we were just shown, there seemed to be a much higher number of placements than number of students. And that confused me completely, because surely we only need the number of placements for the number of students, but that may just be me.
So I'll try to answer all of the questions, and Dana might be able to explain a little bit more about the placement. So in terms of the funding, now the local authority has a statutory responsibility in terms of section 19, and when a child is excluded from school, the local authority has the responsibility in relation to that child. So in terms of the funding, so that's not a school's issue. That child is then funded via the high needs block, which is specifically for from government to do that. Where a school decides on a short-term intervention, or maybe even a longer-term intervention for a child who stays on their school roll, the school remains responsible for the funding of that placement, which is where some of this funding goes for. So it's not actually, so that this is the framework is a safer way for the school to be able to procure alternative provision. Now, there's no legal requirement for an alternative provision provider to become registered. And that's really important. But there is a responsibility on the local authority to ensure, sorry, I've got a real frog in my throat today. There is a responsibility on the local authority to ensure that that provision is of a decent quality and is safe. So that's a big chunk of the reason behind the framework. So we ensure that we ensure that providers who actually access the framework meet a level of assurance and criteria that we know that those providers are safe. Because it's absolutely understandable, and I, like you, would say, why is that? If it's unregistered and Ofsted are not seeing it, how do we know that it's safe? So the framework is a way for us to do that. It enables us to do that. So in terms of schools, it's their choice to put children, some children, in alternative provision if it meets that child's needs. But that's a choice for the school. The funding that they give as part of this enables them to do that. So, this isn't a burden on schools in the way that it's perhaps not clear enough in the report, but it's not a burden on schools in the way that you might think. The local authority isn't profiting from this. The framework is actually a quality assurance mechanism for the local authority to ensure that children who are in alternative provision, for whatever reason, that we're assured. So Dana and her team, for example, do regular spot checks, site visits, safeguarding checks in relation to these providers, because one extreme would be somebody decides I'm going to be an alternative provision provider and I don't need to do anything in terms of these checks. The school and the head teacher have legal responsibilities to ensure that the child is safe, that their attendance is monitored, that the provision is assured. That's a lot of work for a school who might be struggling for a number of different reasons. So the school has legal responsibilities, the local authority has legal responsibilities. This framework is a way to enable that to happen.
Sorry, can I just come in on that though? While it is extremely important and absolutely paramount when we talk about the framework around safeguarding, but this is also about progression. What we need is for children that are in alternative curriculum, alternative education provision, is that they're actually still progressing, so they're actually engaging in education, and it's good to have fun and it's good to be engaged and have a hook into something that you're interested in. But what we want to see when now young people step out into an alternative curriculum, that it is exactly that. There's an alternative way of learning and you're still progressing with your maths and your English and all that sort of stuff. So yes, there's the safeguarding bit, but there's also the element around learning as well. Thank you. Sorry about that.
And the placements bit, I think, Dana, can you just explain the difference between the providers and the placements?
Yeah, sorry, apologies if that is confusing. Just obviously we showed the data in placement days as well as number of students. So students can access more than one placement dependent on their needs. So a child could be accessing more than one placement day at that specific provision. So they might be doing 2 days. So the numbers won't align to exactly to the number of students, if that makes sense. Sorry.
Does everybody turn your microphones off? Sorry. Councillor Wilson, have they answered all your questions? Is that okay? Yeah. Councillor Whittaker.
You'll think my questions are really easy after all.
I know these new councillors are asking tough questions.
I've got some nice easy ones for you. We talk about commissioned alternative provision interventions being delivered partly at Coit Primary School. I've recently been contacted by a parent who has a child in the alternative provision there. And what she said to me is that she's been advised, and I think she said by the school, that the funding, that the council is no longer funding that from January 2027. So does this now mean that that will go ahead? So that's, you know, that it will still carry on being funded. It was quite a lengthy email she sent me because she was not happy. So that's one thing. Another question, this is just, I think, refreshing my memory really. Do all alternative provision providers on the framework, is there a scale of charges, or can they all charge different, or do they do it on a case-by-case basis depending on the child's needs or whatever? And another question was that the report talks about the need to evidence the impact of alternative provision intervention. So do we have a timescale whereby we hope to be bringing some data back to the committee to see how that's going? So that was my 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor. In relation to the first question, I'm not aware of that situation with Coit, so I would have to go away from here and follow that up, if I may, and feedback to you directly. That's fine. I shall do that. In terms of costings, the way that we work currently is that we have strands. We have seen in other local authorities where providers can charge whatsoever they will, but also those local authorities often don't have oversight of that, so schools choose to buy it in or not. We have specific strands around key stage 3-4 interventions and around high needs and vocational, so things that are going to lead those young people to a vocational qualification. So that's the way that we are structured in terms of pricing. And in terms of the evidence, that is something that we are currently working on. So I would like to think that in the next 6 months we would have some real good data to feedback to not just to the committee, but also to our wider partners around the local authority.
Councillor Mallinson, did you forget you put your hand up? It's been a while.
No, I did. I thought it was everyone.
I'll do you last if that's all right.
That's okay. First, I'm going to be a bit negative, and I have to say it's not pointing at anyone in this room. We're working in a system which is so dysfunctional, and I absolutely appreciate we have to make the best out of it as we can, and really appreciate the work you guys do to try and make that happen. I agree with Councillor Lupton and share deep concerns about the unregulated nature of alternative provision. I have ever since I heard about them. It's part of our fragmented, unfit education system. As an ex-education union officer, I sat on the schools forum for years. Every year there was hand-wringing about exclusions amongst the heads, governors and officers around the table, and how they were remorselessly rising. That was in the teenies, and every year they went up. I'm really concerned that this is continuing. The graph just shows it endlessly carries on. It's a trend, in my opinion, in secondaries, which I think data that the committee is going to see later is borne out by that data. It's a trend in secondaries to become ever more oppressive and non-inclusive. So I've got 4 questions. The first one is one that might be hard to answer. Maybe there isn't really an answer at the moment. How are we going to reverse the trend to oppressive education in Sheffield schools? Examples include forbidding communication outside the classroom on corridors, detentions for looking out of the window, forgetting a pen, many others, overuse of internal exclusions, particularly for SENS students. What work has been done to persuade academies to reverse this oppressive trend, which is getting worse? Because that makes our schools more and less inclusive, and the exclusions will get bigger, inevitably. Sorry, I'm a bit cross about it. It's just a passion of mine. The second question is on page 46, I'm quoting page 46, it says, school arranged provision. Some schools continue to use alternative providers outside the framework. I think it would be useful to know how many schools. I presume it's mainly secondary, but it would be nice to know the numbers of primary as well. These are Sheffield children. Who is regulating these alternative providers, if it's not us? Because it probably isn't Ofsted. Or are we just washing our hands of these children? My third question is, are we trying to reduce the number of providers? Because I feel that the more there are, the greater the risk. There's all sorts of dark places that might be existing where things are not what they should be. And the last thing, just about on page 57, the equality impact assessment isn't populated. Obviously, this affects minority students and SEND students particularly. So obviously, we'd like to see a copy of that. Okay, thank you.
So I'll attempt to answer all of those, Councillor Allison. I don't know why I've got a frog in my throat today. In terms of reversing the trend, what's interesting about the challenges that we've got as a city is that it's sadly not uncommon. All core cities in various ways have been dealing with this as part of the national system. In terms of reversing the trend, there are multiple things happening that are not answers in and of themselves, but building blocks. So the SEND reform, I think, is positive, which we're going to talk about next. To date, we've not had an alternative provision strategy in the city. So what that means is that individual schools or multi-academy trusts have basically done their own thing and operated independently, really, without a single agreement or a strategy. So we've pulled together multi-academy trust CEOs, head teachers, alternative provision providers, parents, young people, in the development of a single strategy. So that work is live and ongoing. So in the next probably 8 weeks, we'll have that. It's going to be important that members are aware of that and all of that work. So in a way that is going to help in terms of how we perceive alternative provision, what we do short term, what we do immediately, short term and longer term, and also what that means in terms of reintegration, resourcing and practice in relation to this. So that's a positive development. There's a massive amount of work going on in relation to that as well. It's funded via the Department of Education. We're working with an organisation who I've worked with previously as part of a national scheme around SEND and alternative provision change programmes, Olive Academies, and also Channel 3 consulting in relation to this. So we're really hopeful about that. We've also strengthened leadership. So we've got Dr. Shelley Woods-Gallagher starting with us as the Assistant Director for Inclusion. She starts in 2 weeks. So we're strengthening leadership in that area. And really importantly is that it's about the needs of children and young people and not about individual organisations. So we're clear about that. Also, government policy, the new guidance that's come out this week, I was reading it this morning, really interesting in terms of the focus on inclusion as well. So, and the Ofsted inspection framework has also changed in relation, and now for the first time actually has an inclusion element to it, because previously a school in the previous inspection framework could have been judged to be outstanding, for example, and still have large numbers of excluded children. Now the framework actually offers a more intense focus in relation to those things. So none of those things individually are a silver bullet, but combined we have a chance of beginning to reverse the trend. What I'm not doing is dressing it up. It's a challenge. It is a challenge, and I agree with you about that. In terms of the number of schools who sit outside of the framework, Dana might know that, but I will come back to you on that and what happens in relation to that. In terms of the chance of are we washing our hands of those children? Absolutely not. Because what's really important is that we have eyes on those children, that those children have safe and well checks. You know, if we think about children missing in education or educated other than at school, or children are electively home educated, children in alternative provision, all of those children collectively need to be seen as almost like a school outside of school, if you like. And so there's a number of ways to do that. And yeah.
So just on that point,
yeah.
Are you aware of the alternative providers that some of these schools are using, which aren't part of the framework? And so are you actually seeing those children in those settings?
Do you want to answer that, Dana?
Yeah, so we have gathered intelligence around the provisions that some schools are using that are not on the framework, and are looking at having discussions with those providers as to why they're not on the framework. But if I could turn that back on its head, in that the majority of schools will not use something that's not on the framework. So actually we're talking about a very small minority of schools using provision that's not procured through the framework. So those numbers are really quite small, but we are gathering that intelligence and we are working with schools and with those providers.
Sorry, I'm just mindful of time. I'm sorry, I don't want to stifle debate, but it's very hot in here and everybody's melting. So if we can just keep our answers quite succinct, but kind of get to the point, if that's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do. So in terms of it's the head teacher's responsibility statutorily in relation to provision if it sits outside of the framework, or any child that's actually in alternative provision, it's their responsibility to see that. In terms of the equality impact assessment, that's been uploaded and is available now, and further work has been done in relation to the equality impact assessment. And in terms of the number of providers, it's not up to the local authority to determine the number of providers, but what we're looking to do is have sufficient number of places in order to meet the need, because many of the providers are independent businesses, but the local authority's role is to ensure that there's sufficiency in terms of the numbers of places.
Thank you. And just on the equality impact assessment, it has been redone, and I thought it had been sent out to everyone, but I know it has been uploaded onto the website with the papers, so it has been redone. Thank you, Councillor Mollington. Councillor Bannister.
Yeah, just one last quick one, because most of my questions have been covered by other people. So we're talking about APEP having a strong outcome, have a good path. I do totally agree with that, because it does need to be something that's this journey rather than just an ending. My only concern is it says that the plan must be focused. My concern is we don't spend too long making the plan, and that we get the kids into these APs as quickly as we can, because obviously it makes a difference if we get things downstream. So I guess how quickly we make that happen, and also can we sort of can jump into the AP quickly and then focus the plan as it goes on, or do we need to do the plan before we can move them into it?
I think one of the things for us is to have a clear intention of what is the trajectory or journey for that young person. So I think that's important. I think if we don't start with that in mind, then often children are just placed in AP and it becomes, for want of a better term, a holding place, which is actually not what we want. We want that education to be intentional and for us to understand what part of that journey it's actually meeting and actually what part of their needs is that actually going to meet whilst they're in that alternative provision. So yes, I think that things perhaps do move much more quickly than they used to in the past, but I do think it is important that we have that clear intent. What is the journey for that young person? Is it about re-engagement back into school? Is it that they need a specialist provision? So we're looking at transition, because then that actually enables us to hone that provision correctly for that young person, and ultimately we've got to get it right for those young people.
Thank you, Dana. So with that in mind, thank you everyone for your questions. It's been a really good conversation on that issue today. And there will be more coming forward that we'll be able to let you know. So today's recommendations on this report is to note that the strategy for alternative education provision described in this report, note the scope of Sheffield City Council's AP and the allocation approved by the Director of Children's Services to manage this service, approve the variation of the commissioning decided date 31st of January 2023 for the alternative provision to allow an additional commission of 2 years and 3 months from July 2026 at an estimated cost of £7 million, which has been explained in more detail. This will allow procurement of these services for a further 2 years commencing September 2026, and notes that the £7 million spend includes the delivery of alternative education provision to pupils in the city where the local authority statutory duties arise. Are we all in agreement? I'm taking silence as a yes. Thank you very much. Okay, mindful of time, it's 11:25, and we've got 4 more items on the agenda and people are getting a little bit uncomfortable. Would you like to take just a couple of minute comfort break, or would you like to just carry on? What would you like? Would anybody like to get a drink of water, or would you want to just carry on? Yeah, so we'll just take a few minutes comfort break if that's all right. 5 minutes, thank you. For your patience, and thank you for your commitment to the heat. Thank you for anyone watching for your patience. So we're now on agenda item number 10, which is on page 59 of your pack. This is the Send Reforms Commissioning, and presenting today we've got Jo Laidlaw and Candy Lawson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Candy Lawson. I'm Senior Joint Transformation Manager. I work across the ICB and the Local Authority in Commissioning.
I'm Jo Laidlaw. I am the Assistant Director for SEND in the Local Authority.
Yes, hi. Jo Horobin, Director of Integrated Commissioning. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a presentation that summarises the paper, and we'll go through it now. So implementation of the Experts at Hand programme is as part of the SEND reforms. Sheffield and other local authorities nationally were given notification from the Department of Education of the excuse me, it's contagious, this. Of the Department for Education from the Experts at Hand grant and the intent to establish that programme in late March, so relatively recently. Since then, we've worked at pace to submit information to the Department of Education, and we've developed plans across our SEND partnership in response to this national programme. The local authority has a duty to respond to the programme, and we believe it represents a significant opportunity as the Experts at Hand model is very much in line with the ambitions of our SEND strategy, which has previously been heard at committee. And it will also just really enable us to develop fast-paced implementation of improvements to the SEND system, and ultimately it will improve outcomes and experiences for children and families. So we're going to take you through the ask of committee and the overview of the delivery model. So firstly, acknowledging the grant from the Department of Education, which is clearly ring-fenced for the purpose of implementing the programme, and in line with the Council's constitution, we're requesting the following. Delegated authority to the Strategic Director of Children's Services to take necessary actions to implement the programme and allocate funding accordingly, and approval to commence commissioning activity according to the grant criteria and within the financial envelope of the grant to achieve the roles and the functions that are required within Experts at Hand and are clearly set out for us. So this slide shows the projected investment and spend by quarter. Please note that this is an indication of how the overall grant will be allocated and profiled over the programme. As it's a really large-scale transformation programme with complex mobilisation requirements, we will need to respond as we begin recruitment and commissioning. And a lot of the spend will be dependent on things like timelines, recruitment, etc., noting the speed of the implementation of this programme. So the box on the left shows how the grant will be split over workforce investment and transformation and administration of the grant. This split is prescribed to us within the grant conditions from Department for Education. The three-quarter overview gives a projection of how we anticipate this will map over year one. So again, the roles and the functions listed within this are specifically mandated to us within the grant conditions, and the specific amounts are an indication based on our financial modelling to help us understand what we can, how we can get the biggest bang for the buck in Sheffield, really. And these will be defined further through recruitment and commissioning processes. You'll note the majority of the allocated funding will be used to create frontline workforce and capacity that works with settings and with our children and families in the city. Sheffield SEND leaders have worked together across the partnership to develop the plans. We're actively working with the SEND, through the Sheffield SEND partnership with the Integrated Care Board, Sheffield Parent Carer Forum, health provider groups through Sheffield Children's Hospital, Learn Sheffield and education representatives across the sector. There are clear guidelines from DFE that are developing and iterative. So we're in active contact with our Department for Education representative. Joe's in pretty much daily contact with the DFE, and they're responding to learning from local areas and the intelligence that they're getting back from local areas, and then issuing guidance in a kind of an iterative and incremental way. So this for us is a strength because they're listening to local areas, they're responding and they're iterating their guidance. So it's a developing agenda and we need to be agile in response to that. So the following specific roles listed on the slide are mandated within the guidance as important for this work and based on research about what's going to work for children and families. So key enablers to achieving this ambitious programme are co-design. We've placed a lot of importance on working collaboratively with our partners across the sector and through our established SEND partnership that's reported here previously within the SEND strategy, and ensuring there's a connection through the system that makes sense for families. Creating a truly multidisciplinary way of working and expertise will be really key. This is an opportunity to create integrated ways of working with practitioners across different parts of the system really truly working together. Creating a shift in the system towards earlier identification and inclusion. And this city has got a real history around early identification and preventative ways of working, so we're building on that strength. Embedding this work within our existing SEND strategy, so this is not a separate project. It's designed to be part of that system-wide response. We're taking a system commissioning approach, working across the local authority and the ICB to commission scalable and holistic services. And as leaders, we're developing this work with connectivity across those strategies, across the Best Start strategy, Families First Partnership and SEND. So we're seeing it as a system and working really hard to make those connections and make sure we create one system for families. So I'm going to hand over to Joe to talk through some of the detail.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a few slides now on actually how we've come up with our plan. So a lot of our direction, or all our direction, has been shaped by extensive engagement with education colleagues, health colleagues, families and community partners. We've listened to lived experiences, which has allowed us to have an increasing understanding about the current system, which currently feels difficult, inconsistent and fragmented for families. The key themes that came out of our work with families and settings was that there was a delay in accessing support, inconsistent thresholds, an unclear referral pathway, duplication, often they felt that the processes were duplicated, workforce pressures, and that local support was required. So whilst we've done a lot of co-production to write our plan, we're very aware that co-production isn't going to be a one-off activity, and we need to continue doing co-production throughout the implementation of our strategy. The model that we've created reflects what we've been told was needed within our authority. So settings want to have earlier practical support that is coordinated and rooted in relationships, which is a challenge at present. There's a clear request from settings and families for faster support with children, practical advice, a stronger level of communication between professionals and settings, and professionals come and work alongside our settings. The intention is that the support is proactive, relational, and easier for access. The direction sets out a whole system shift towards earlier, joined-up, community-based support. The vision is a more connected system to serve our families and our communities, with key principles around earlier identification, community working, multi-agency collaboration, relational practice, strengthening mainstream inclusion. So it's not a single project, it's a long-term system transformation programme. The proposed operating model strengthens neighbourhood working and coordination support across agency. The model places partnership, working closely with children, young people and families, and the intention is to reduce fragmentation and improve coordination. Support should feel joined up rather than for families feeling that they have to navigate multiple systems. The model supports a graduated approach where needs are responded to earlier, with clearer pathways, shared accountability, and an increased level of communication. We want professionals working as one system wrapping around our families and our settings. The expert at hand is designed to make specialist support more accessible. Support becomes part of an ongoing partnership model. Regular setting-based meetings will lead to needs being identified with proactive support wrapping around. Schools will receive advice, practical strategies, direct intervention and navigation support around our multiple systems. The model supports a workforce confidence that needs to increase and will increase over time. It will increase inclusion capacity within our settings. And the work strongly aligns with the key piece of work that we're doing around the graduated approach. This slide outlines the different professionals that will contribute to our coordinated support. We have included the advisory teachers, educational psychologists, speech and language therapists, SEND navigators, family intervention and support around social, emotional and mental health. Settings will feel more supported in embedding effective inclusion. The core priority is strengthening the provision and offering a continuum of provision which will clarify universal support, targeted intervention, specialist support and statutory pathways. The right support, meeting the needs at the right time. Settings getting clearer expectations and guidance around what SEND support is and how to escalate and get the correct support wrapped around children. Multi-agency working will become embedded within the graduated approach. We know that at the moment, support is lacking coordination, which is increasing the escalation of need for our young people. The SEND reform is aiming to increase inclusion earlier. Alternative provision will need to become more relational, more therapeutic and better connected to reintegration pathways. So here there is a stronger focus on transition support, social and emotional and mental health pathways, neurodiversity and reducing that level of fragmentation that the system currently feels. We want children to remain connected to their local communities wherever possible.
Okay, so in summary, we hope you'll agree that we think this is a really exciting and significant opportunity for Sheffield that contributes towards our council plan in those areas. So really delivering the right support at the right time for children and families by wrapping around settings and communities and enabling support into local communities and settings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you everyone for that. before I ask for any questions or comments on this, I think it might be a good idea for me to try and pull something together for all members to understand what all our strategies are and how they all link in, because we're talking about different strategies and plans, and new members in the room won't know about them. So I think if officers can get those to me, and then I can have a conversation with members about how it all links moving forward, please. Thank you. Okay, questions and comments on this paper? Thank you. Councillor Goddard, Councillor Ulster and Councillor Morrison.
Thank you all. So obviously SEND's one of the most serious things that we deal with as councillors, and so I welcome any funding that's going to come to meet those sorts of needs for our kids. But I'd like to ask whether the money from this fund will be allocated equally across all schools in Sheffield, or whether it will be concentrated among schools with higher levels of SEND needs. And then, in addition to that, just when considering how we implement it, could specific focus perhaps be given to ADHD waiting lists in Sheffield, and how funding this could help quicker diagnosis, because obviously that's one of the big things in our city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The funding will be used to create the workforce, which will be equally distributed across the city, and then we'll be working to work on universal, targeted and specialist support around all settings. Would you like to add anything?
So in relation to ADHD, so we have a separate programme. I think this is kind of what Dawn's referring to, isn't it? That we have a neurodiversity transformation programme in Sheffield that's completely connected to this, and that is specifically looking at how we try to move from a very diagnosis-focused system to a needs-led system. So there's a lot of activity, which I won't attempt to summarise because it would be quite a long conversation, wouldn't it be? But actually maybe a briefing at some other point about the neurodiversity programme and the details of that, and how we believe that will have impact on children and families and on the waiting list might be of benefit. What this will do is this will start to move some of the system support into our settings at an earlier point. So what happens now is children needs are identified and then they go straight to that waiting list. Whereas actually we could be supporting much earlier on through the experts at hand model on the ground with children and families and in those settings, whether or not there's a need for diagnosis. Does that make sense? So it's really needs-led, and this is this is really the foundation of how we will achieve some of that change for children and families.
The focus has been around a proactive support rather than a reactive level of support. So we're trying to be proactive in how we meet needs in the settings.
Also, to just add around the targeting, so as Joe said, we will begin the programme, won't we, with very equal spread of support across the city. So this is a city-wide resource. But as we start to learn and develop, this is what we were talking about in terms of that agility of the programme, we may find real pockets of very, very high need in the city. We know we have a lot of that intelligence already through our data, and then that will lead us to targeting some of the resource accordingly. But we're trying to start with a kind of an even spread, aren't we, across the city? I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I think Steve wanted to come in, but what I would just like to say is that this is about the needs of the child. So regardless of where they are in the city, it might be that there are some areas in the city where the needs, as Candy said, may initially be higher, but by implementing this system, what we don't want is lots of children on waiting lists and not getting support. And then the anticipation that once you've had a diagnosis that something's automatically going to change, because that doesn't. What we want to be able to do is support families and children really early on. And if they need a diagnosis, they can go on a list, but they're still getting support while they're waiting, which helps the family and that young person's with their development as well. So it's kind of a bit of both, really. Sorry. Steve?
Candy and you, Councillor Dale, have just said what I was going to say, so yeah, all good.
Thank you. So, Councillor Ulster.
Thank you for the report. I mean, on reading this sounds a really positive move. It almost sounds like, why haven't we done this a long time ago? But, you know, we are. I have one really quite significant concern about it, which is where are we going to find these specialists? Because specialists can't just be conjured out of thin air. They need training, experience, and are there enough there? And will we in Sheffield be able to attract them and attract enough of them to ensure we can actually deliver this programme? My other question is probably more directed at Meredith, which is really about, this is obviously a significant change, it's a significant amount of money. I am assuming, and I'm sure you're going to just confirm, that we're going to get regular progress reports on how this is going to be implemented.
I'm happy to answer that one first. So we have a SEND improvement board that meets on a monthly basis at the moment. We will make sure, and I think we've agreed that on a quarterly basis, we will make sure that councillors are updated on the improvements of this, which this is part of that.
You're absolutely correct in terms of the recruitment, and it's something all our regional neighbours are feeling as well, because this is a programme that's going across the country. But when we've designed this, we've designed that with in mind. We're very aware of the shortages that we find in educational psychologists. So we're creating a post with assistant educational psychologists. So we're embedding and producing a method of grow your own as well. We've not gone for one specialist, we've gone for a variety. As you see that we've got wrapped around the children and the settings. So we're not trying to put all our eggs in one basket, we're trying to make sure that we have that scope. We've also linked with the university, which has got a speech and language programme, and actually trying to link in there and have those therapists come into our sector as well. And then we've linked in regionally, because we want to ensure that actually we're outward facing. So we've linked in with Doncaster, Barnsley and Rotherham, who are part of our neighbours, to make sure that actually when we're creating posts, we're doing it together, we're not outbidding each other, and we're making sure that actually we come through and the focus is on providing that support for our children. Anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. Is that all right, Councillor Austin? Councillor Mallinson.
Thank you, yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, obviously SEND is vital. It's great, reflecting Councillor Goddard's comment, it's great that there's not more funding, or this is funding to make a change in structure, because the structure isn't working at the moment. I do worry, the Green Party worries that it's not the SEND system that needs to change, it's the whole system that needs to change. At the moment, the primary focus is on high-stakes testing and exams, and we need to move towards an inclusive, creative curriculum, which fosters skills in teamwork and dialogue that are essential to modern life, not foster skills in passing an exam and then without any independence. So that on one side is obviously good that there's some funding. Councillor Wilson's asked my question about the lack of skills, and that is a worry that will continue, and hopefully, we'll manage that. And my only question is a technical one about the slides. Some of the slides are unreadable because there's so much information, the type was too small, and it contained data that I don't think is in the pack. Looked interesting. Could you please send those to us now? And in future, just could we have slides, all slides, in advance? Maybe the day before or something. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. And as Councillor Olsen said, it sounds wonderful. And yeah, we talk about that the proposed model is not fully funded, so presumably the 4.3 million just gets us going with things. So my concern is, what will we do for additional funding that clearly will be required as we're moving on? It talks about financial remodelling is underway. What does that actually look like?
So what we need to think about with this model is that this is a precursor to the way that we're going to be working in localities, because 100% of our work happens in localities. So we're thinking about the relationship between this and, for example, we've just talked about exclusion, for example, or inclusion. What does children missing in education, elective home education, current provision that supports children, how does that map against this as well? In addition to that, funding via the government high needs block, and if we need to utilise some of the high needs block in terms of that specialist support, which is what it's there for, we can also utilise some of that funding to support this integration into localities. What's important about this work is that it's in addition to what already exists. So that's really important. So it's not, we're not kind of saying this is a new fund, but actually it's old money and it was used to be used for this. This is actually new funding and offers additionality. What's really important as well is that with things like speech and language, for example, there are well over 150 different commissions that happen for speech and language, not from the local authority, but individual schools or trusts or lots of things that happen across the city. There's a broader piece of work which Candy's leading on with Len Sheffield colleagues around pulling what does that look like together in terms of a test and learn piece, because what happens with individual commissions is that it creates gaps potentially for children and families to fall into. So we're looking at the commissioning, additional funding, teams and commissions that already exist within schools, and that this is not, it's not an either or. We need to see it as this is one system working within a locality to meet the needs of children. So there are multiple strands of it, but I suppose put simply, it's about this is additional. We need to ensure that it works with the resource that's already there in order to give the kids the best possible chance.
Thank you. Councillor Bannister, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just saying I do think this is a wonderful idea. One of the hardest things about being a SEND parent is not knowing what you don't know. You have to spend so much time researching and trying to figure out what's actually available. I mean, I've got 2 of them. Second time round, a lot easier, because I already had a dossier. So bringing it all to the school rather than waiting and, yeah, trying to figure out if it's this person, then having them have the same conversation 3 times. Waste the kids' time, waste the department's time. So yeah, it's great that we're bringing it together and bringing it to school. One small question, I guess, is it mentions that it's going to be submitted and approved on the 19th of June. Just thought to see if that's happened. If we've, yeah.
It has a date, yeah.
Yes, if you come back to us on that, just confirming it to make sure we are go on this.
Time scales were aggressive from the Department of Education, but we got it over the line.
What I would say is it hasn't been approved yet by the DFE, which is we're still waiting for that funding confirmation. So we have met the deadline of going in by the 19th of June. The DFE advisor was supportive and had looked at our plans. But there is now a process, so there's 152 local authority plans, I believe everybody submitted, which they're going through and making decisions about the funding coming out, but we are working to a September start date in the belief that it will be approved and we will get the funding.
Thank you. Meredith, Councillor Goddard.
Sorry, just on the off chance that the DFE didn't approve that funding, and we were to start would we be starting the programme in September before any funding came in? And then what would we do with the shortfall?
So we will know by September whether we have it or not. I think it's there is a high probability that an exceptionally high probability that we will get the funding. In fact, Jo probably has more information than I do because she's on speed dial with.
We've worked with the DFE throughout all of this, so whilst we had the deadline of the 19th of June, that wasn't the first time they saw our plan. We've also been invited by the DFE to share our plan, and they did that on a call with, where we shared it across all the policy writers, which should give us confidence, and then they're coming back in December for us to be able to share our implementation. I've also got her on speed dial, asking her when the money's coming. However, they did confirm that it should be here by the end of June, so we should know prior and allow us to mobilise.
So they've got until Tuesday if you're watching. Councillor Lupton.
Thank you, Dawn. Just about what training will be given directly to existing school staff and Senko leads in school to improve any existing knowledge or lack of knowledge, and what, you know, for example, just going back to ADHD, I've heard examples of Senko's not recognising that girls can mask ADHD. There's new information coming out all the time and people are learning more and more, but how is that getting back into existing staff to enable them to better support our children?
So this model is exactly around that. So we're trying to be preventative. So that's why we're doing the termly meetings with them. And in that, we'll be looking at how we support classroom practitioners, how we support Senkos, but we've also increased the layering where actually we're working with MAT leaders as well, so we can really implement change. So the process is around that embedding of inclusive support. Currently, we do have a training programme, and our educational psychologists do training, and our assets team do training. So we are building on existing practice there and existing good practice. But our focus will be to have a planning meeting with all schools. We want to make sure that we're present. We're also offering within this a citywide model of training where we're using the educational psychologists to produce citywide guidance. And on the back of the integrated resource paper that's come out this week, we'll also be writing our own for the Sheffield way, and actually how does our support embed what the guidance is as well. So we're really around that, because we know that actually if we work on whole settings rather than individual cases, we'll have a greater level of impact for our children.
Thank you, Jo. Councillor Mallison, did you just want to come back in?
Yes, quick one. Are all academies and private schools or providers required to be part of this LA-led initiative?
They're not required to be. However, it's a free resource with specialist level of support. But what I will say to you is we will be tracking who engages and who doesn't, and we'll be working with everybody to make sure we can engage with all. But no whip.
Are you expecting there to be sort of 99 or even greater percentage?
In my knowledge, in my experience, when you offer something free, people tend to come. But obviously we can monitor it, track it, and make sure we're proactive in getting that engagement.
If I can just add to that as well, though, I know your cautiousness around academisation and academies and relationships. A lot of work has been done throughout the whole SEND transformation. They've been really engaged, and Steve and Learn Sheffield have built fantastic relationships. It's in everyone's best interest for the outcomes of our children to be involved in this, and it is a whole system transformation. It's coming down as a government guidance that this is what we need to be doing. So I would not imagine there would be many academies that think they've got it right on their own and that they're not part of that system. But as Jo said, we will be keeping an eye on that and having those conversations.
Can I just chip in on that, Dawn? I do feel that there are very good academies and very good academy chains, don't get me wrong, but is it in their best interest? Well, they see their best interest because of the system we're in, maximising exam results, and that's why we've seen things like off-rolling and so on, and very uninclusive practices that are ongoing. So I'm not quite so positive, but I know I know that the individual employees generally do want to do the right thing, but the institution may be more reluctant.
So I think I'd just say that Ofsted are very much looking at how schools are inclusive as well. And actually, when we speak to our multi-academy trusts, there is a real conversation about making sure that children are included, and also civic duty. And so there are some step changes that have taken place, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years, where that civic duty and that place leadership has been very much part of the conversations that we're having. But my experience is that our multi-academy trust CEOs and head teachers are very committed to working with us on this. So I think we will see a real positive steer around that.
And we will track it. Okay, thank you. So, on this paper then, I'm mindful of time. We've got to past. I'm happy to extend the guillotine so that we can get all papers. We can get through all of the papers. So the recommendations on this report is that we acknowledge the £4.3 million from the Department of Education grant allocation award to Sheffield City Council for the purpose of implementing experts at hand. We delegate authority to the Strategic Director for Children's Services, and we approve the commencement of commissioning activity for delivery. Do we all agree? Yes, thank you. We all agree. So we then now go on to agenda item number 11, which is on page 81 of your pack. This is the pupil outcomes in Sheffield school settings, results from summer 2025. And we've got Pat Buttrell and Stephen Betts from Learn Sheffield. Thank you. Sorry everyone, if we can keep this quite succinct as well, I'm going to give you until 25 past. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Pat Buttrell. I'm Assistant Director of School Effectiveness in the Belonging Directorate, and my colleague.
Stephen Betts from Learn Sheffield.
Thank you, Stephen. The report today gives us a system-wide view of pupil outcomes in Sheffield. We use the latest national data across attainment, attendance, exclusions and key vulnerabilities. Sheffield has strong inspection outcomes, but there are clear challenges around attendance, exclusions and particularly secondary attainment. This particularly impacts vulnerable children. So if we can move on slides, please. The purpose of this report is just to give you that review. The key messages are not consistently strong across all phases in Sheffield, and there is variation across the system. This creates a clear need for a coordinated citywide approach to the response to this. Thank you. If you look at those three columns there, so the first column is the outcomes for what we call good level of development. This is an assessment taken at the end of reception year, usually the year the child is age 5, and assesses the key abilities of children within that. So we're talking about some literacy elements, some physical elements, and some social and communication elements. If you look at Sheffield's outcomes there, Sheffield is in the blue. It's probably online, just a little bit higher than the core cities, but nationally just dropping below. As we move through the system, so key stage 2 is the end of primary school assessments, commonly known as SATs. We then start to lag behind the system and going through to the end of what we call key stage 4, which is traditionally the GCSEs, the English and Maths grade 4, which is what we call the gateway result, I suppose, for moving on to level 3 qualifications and apprenticeships. We're starting to dip further and further below. So we've got a consistent pattern across the system, and these same children are more likely to experience persistent absence, be excluded from school, and achieve lower attainment. And this links in with a lot of the other kind of work that we've spoken about this morning through the AP strategy, through the SEND work as well. Thank you. The system challenge for us is the secondary phase, is the pressure point. Okay? Key stage 4 outcomes are declining. Now, if you look from good level of development to key stage 2, then gaps start to get bigger as time moves on. We're around 5 percentage points below national, and our performance is in the bottom half of core cities. And the gap is widening versus national and our peer core cities as well. The underlying challenge for us is the increasing level of complexity of need and a current fragmented system around inclusion, SEND, alternative provision and attendance. Today we've come to you to talk about why we need an education strategy to address this. The data is telling us that the outcomes are uneven across all phases. The gap is widening as pupils move through the education system, particularly at key stage 4, and the poorer outcomes are closely linked to vulnerabilities such as vulnerability, attendance and SEND. The reason why we need a citywide strategy is to have a shared approach across schools, multi-academy trusts and the services around this, including inclusion, attendance, attainment and send, so that every child has the opportunity to belong, achieve and thrive. The ask of the committee today is to note the current position and the trends and acknowledge the scale of the challenge, to endorse the continued focus on vulnerable learners and support the development of a citywide education strategy working with schools, trust and partners. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Pat. Stephen, you wanting to add anything? No? Okay. I think this is a vital strategy that needs to be developed. The reports that we've already had today regarding SEND, regarding alternative curriculum, would bring this all together really, and it's been surprising that we've not had one before, and that we're in the position that we're in. The outcomes are not great. I mean, you know, we've all got our own theories about why that is, but you know, it is, and nationally it's not great either, but we are falling further behind, which we cannot afford to do. Our young people are our future. I don't want to break out into song or anything like that or be corny, but they are, and we need to invest in them in order for them to make Sheffield flourish. We need to make sure that we're giving them all the tools and skills that they need to be successful in whatever area and whatever direction they take. I think this is one of the key strategies that will help them to be able to do that. Have any members got any questions or comments on the report? Councillor, well, everyone. So we'll start with Councillor Alston, then Councillor Goddard, Mallinson and Whittaker.
Thank you, Dawn. I am a bit surprised we don't already have a strategy, but equally, I think my principal question here is, what will motivate education providers to cooperate with the strategy that we've got? Are we going to be developing this alongside the trusts, because whatever you think of academic trusts, that they're there? Are we going to be able to get buy-in from all those different organisations? So that's my principal and major question, I think, about the strategy. Reading the data, I actually found it really worrying. I mean, just a couple of comments to pull out. 1 in 10 of those children who attend a special school actually attend less than 50% of the time. I mean, why? And why is it that overall we have a declining performance in the real basics of English and maths, you know, across the whole cohort? And I just wonder what analysis has been done, what work has been done to try and identify the reasons behind these declines. Thank you.
Oh God, I want to answer after that. Go on. I'll just say.
Okay, I'm going to do those in reverse if that's okay, because I think the second and third question lead us back into the first answer really. So we're not talking here about different children than we've been talking about all morning, actually. So you know, if you're looking at the data, what the data tells us about the decline in English and maths, it is a story of complexity. So there will be individual setting challenges in terms of quality, but what we're actually talking about here is our ability to support and meet the needs of young people. And a lot of the young people that we'll be looking at here are the same young people that we've looked at in other parts of our agenda this morning. There are, if you go through the different papers for this piece, there's just over 17,000 young people in Sheffield who have at least 2, if not 3, of English as an additional language, and you know, the other kind of disadvantage and SEND and so on. So that is that aggregation of that need which sits underneath our challenge. You're right to be concerned, and there's a reason why I think we collectively are not presenting this as, you know, hooray, we've got a little improvement in this one and a little improvement in that one. Overall, we've got a declining trend, and that's what we need to address. It is about complexity. Going back into your first question, though, I will pick up the special school one specifically, because there is a very specific answer to that. In fact, I'll do that next, if that's okay. So, about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, it was clear in our data that our special school attendance was a concern. We did do a deep dive into that at the time. We did an insight report, which was published, The actual specifics of that cohort of young people is actually about our provision rather than about our the quality of attendance provision. So in Sheffield, in simplistic terms, of our group of special schools, there are at least 2 settings whose principal purpose is to meet the needs of young people who are not attending school, so unable to attend school for maybe mental health reasons or others. When you compare our special schools like for like with similar special schools, actually our attendance is pretty similar to national. So it is a concern. It's a concern because for individual pupils, but in terms of the data, the way it plays into the data in that way, the reason for it is that our group of special schools includes some provisions that are specifically for that. And obviously special schools, unlike primary schools and secondary schools, if we were to go to all 150 local authorities, we'd see different profiles, different approaches. It isn't always the same everywhere. So that's the answer on the special school one. And then in terms of the strategy, I think for me, and I suppose your kind of core question, which has come through this morning 3 or 4 times in different places, of so why would people engage? I think what we're talking about here, and I couldn't be more enthusiastic and supportive of this direction of travel, is the need for a strategy is to address those issues that are systemic. So, you know, whilst an individual council service or an individual education setting or a health department will always look at its own performance and want to improve, you know, the kind of issues we're talking about here are issues that I can't address entirely on my own as a head teacher. Stephen Meredith and Pat can't address on their own as a local authority, etc., etc. So it's those systemic issues. And for me, the theme of this morning, sitting over there, melting slightly, well done everyone for keeping going, has been about how we as a city address and meet the needs of children and young people who need something additional or different. Because all of these different discussions, whether we're talking about SEND, or attainment, or attendance, or exclusion, in the end come back to how well we collectively meet their needs. Sorry, really, that got a bit preachy at the end, I apologise.
I don't need to come in now, Stephen. You said all my words for me. Thank you. Councillor Goddard.
Yeah, thank you. I note the table on page 88, and as somebody who grew up relying on free school meals myself, I found it slightly shocking that children in that position are today 4 times more likely to be suspended from school than somebody who doesn't receive free school meals. I'm just wondering, has there been any work done to understand why that is, and what's been done to address something that is a very specific issue?
So I suppose in a way I'm going to repeat a little bit what I said before. So that issue is about aggregated need or multiple need or complexity, essentially. So what you're seeing in that data is we have a cohort of more complex young people who we are not effectively meeting the needs of, and the disadvantaged cohort is a part of that. But a lot of those disadvantaged young people will also have SEND, may also have English as an additional language, etc. So it is an issue of disadvantage, but it's probably, in terms of how we take it forward, it's more about how do we better meet need. And to sort of pick up on the SEND conversation that we've just had, how do we get upstream in the support that we provide to young people, to their families and to the professionals that work with them. That's the key to it.
Thank you, Councillor Goddard. And I think on that note around the disadvantage and the complexities of need, I think it is our responsibility on Children's Committee to work with social care, the early help model, but it's also other people's responsibility on different committees as well. So we have to be looking at what are we doing around the cost of living, what are we doing around support, which we do a lot in Sheffield, we do a lot in order to support our families, but what are we also doing in when we start looking at communities, parks and leisure, what is affordable for people to access. So while we have a key responsibility around educational attainment and how we support families through that, as a local authority in all directorates, we have a responsibility to make sure that children from families that are disadvantaged in any way have got equal access, and we need to look at equity across the city for access to all sorts of things. So we need to make sure that when we leave this chamber, after we've spoken together about what we're doing in our directorate, that you go back to your groups to make sure that your representatives on other committees are also making sure that we're thinking about the outcomes for children when they're making decisions on other policies as well. So, Stephen.
just to sort of pick up with an example, I think, in that space, and also to make the case for the strategy as well in terms of how we can do more. I would reference the work around poverty in that space, which is not classic school improvement activity, but came out of the Poverty Truth Commission. It's funded by Public Health. We have our first cohort of people trained to do poverty proofing work in schools, a second cohort happening in the autumn. By this time next year, there'll have been 20 poverty proofing reviews. And I think that will at that point have moved beyond just school settings and into kind of health settings and other settings. There is something for us as a city about how we understand the detail of how poverty impacts and how that's the same for everyone and how other bits of it are different if I'm in Darnell than it is if I'm in Jordanthorpe, or, you know, what's the same and what's different. But that's the kind of thing that an individual school or trust, even at something as large as local authority, can't do on its own. It needs to be a partnership activity.
Thank you. Can I ask that all members get a copy of the Poverty Truth Commission report? If somebody can get that to all members, and then you can have a look at that as well. Thank you. Councillor Mallington.
Thank you. Firstly, just like to say, I mean, in this report, there's a massive amount of very interesting data. I mean, all those graphs. On to sort of reference what Councillor Goddard said about free school meals. I think it'd be, you know, poverty does link strongly with low educational performance. But I didn't see in here any graphs showing the free school meal percentages over time, how they've changed. You know, is it getting worse? Is poverty increasing? Is that affecting results?
I'm going to come at this from a couple of different angles. So since 2016, I think free school meals numbers have gone up by about 5,000 in Sheffield. Now, that adds obvious links to poverty and things like that, but also within that time, Sheffield's undertaken auto-enrolment for free school meals. So anyone there, auto-enrolment. So we auto-enroll people rather than they have to go and apply for their free school meals, which means we will capture everyone who needs a free school meal, which will also mean that those numbers do go up. So I suppose, yes, it is linked to poverty, but also I think it's something that we should be, in this report, holding ourselves a little bit proud about, which is the auto-enrolment, which is starting to be rolled out across other parts of the country as well.
That's really welcome. When was that starting? It's not, so maybe in a year or two's time we'll actually start, as long as nothing else changes in terms of collection of data, we can see a trend.
Was that 2016?
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor, we were kind of groundbreaking on that, and other local authorities have contacted me to ask me to put them in touch with our officers to explain to them how that's done, because that has made sure that no child misses out, so that all children. Now, there is new government policy around, we are looking at potentially a lot more children coming onto free school meals, because at the moment it's for children on universal credit, from universal credit families, but not if you're working. The policy is about to change, so children who are in families that are on employment-based universal credit will also be entitled to free school meals, which I think is great news, actually, that more children will have access to food at school. So the numbers are about to jump up across the country, actually, but that's because of government changing legislation as well, but we will keep track of everything as well.
So maybe if they're introducing new criteria as well, then the data won't be reliable, you know, in terms of comparators. So is there any, maybe we could look at other ways of measuring the children in poverty so that we can see trends in that, because I think it would be really important and it would reflect in the data of the outcomes.
I think the other thing I would flag in that space, and again it connects to other agendas, is our improving ability to understand lived experience, because the data is really helpful, but actually when you can put the data alongside things that give you a different insight into people's lived experience, actually the two things together become, that's the kind of gold bullet, isn't it? So that's a thing that is coming out of the SEND work actually across the partnership and other areas of work, and there's some real strength in that, particularly within some of the council work around youth, for example, that we can kind of build on for that, but that, I think that's a key thing as we go forward.
Thank you. I've got one more point. Sorry. It's obviously very concerning that some secondaries are increasingly uninclusive, as we talked about before, and their core results, or I don't know if it's those individual schools, but the core results overall are also declining. You know, so it's all a bit disappointing. I wanted to sort of bring the committee's attention to the graphs on page 107. There's two graphs there, which I've just moved away from by mistake. And what the graphs show, which I think possibly I would like to see a comment on this, to me it shows, it demonstrates the lack of inclusivity in secondary schools, particularly since 2021. So if you look at the first graph, percentage of young people in state-funded special schools, primary phase. So these are kids who are outside mainstream education in special schools. And, you know, in terms of inclusion, we're doing really well. The orange line, Sheffield, is below both the core cities, way below the core cities, and below England. So our primary schools are doing really well, if that's a measure of inclusion. And maybe it isn't, but it looks like that to me. The graph on secondary schools, special secondary schools, shows the reverse, particularly since 2021, of an increasingly large gap between the number of kids in Sheffield secondary kids in Sheffield special schools, too many S's. You know, the Sheffield is way above both the core cities and even further above England, which is the wrong side of the graph. So that shows to me that our secondary schools have a big problem of inclusion, and it's getting worse. What's your comment?
So we have got an issue, we're challenged with exclusion, for sure. I think that it comes back to our ability to meet need, essentially. Sometimes exclusion is about setting policy, and settings will have different policies in terms of how they approach behaviour, how they approach safeguard, all of those things. But it is much more often actually about reaching a point where we're not meeting the need of that young person. The comment that Meredith made earlier on was right. You know, in primary school, the principal need is the largest need is around, for SEND, is around speech and language. That translates by secondary into SEMH. A lot of those will be the same young people. I suppose the thing I would say, and this might surprise you because you know I'm a primary head by trade, is that's a whole system problem, that's not a secondary school problem. So actually, in my primary school, maybe we didn't meet their speech and language needs. By the time we get to secondary, they're not entering secondary with good enough skills in terms of reading. They're struggling to manage the curriculum. We know, as you and I have had this conversation a lot of times here and elsewhere, about the challenge around engagement in secondary, and the culmination of that is we're unable to meet need, and then that pops up in our data, and it pops up in a complex way. It pops up in our results, it pops up in our attendance, it pops up in our exclusions, but actually it comes back to, have we met need well enough at an early enough stage, and then have we built the platform for young people to go on and succeed. Some of it is about policy and approach, but not all of it by any stretch.
Right, I'm going to have to draw this to a close in a minute because we've got two more items on the agenda, and we're coming to end a meeting, and I'm going to have to extend the guillotine. But I would just say, if you've got anything you want to add, send it in an email and we'll get back to you. Sorry, Councillor Mallington. But I just think that there are some exciting opportunities coming in down from government with regards to looking at the curriculum, looking towards more vocational opportunities for young people as well. That you mentioned, you can't fit square pegs into round holes, and we need a more varied education system. And there's also opportunities and funding coming down, which we're looking into, to looking at enrichment activities for children in schools and in voluntary and community sectors. So looking at the arts and creative things, and not just academia. So I would hope that part of that will fit into everything else that we've talked about today. And we do need this to come back as a work in progress. So if we can arrange for the draft and before the strategy is finished, if it can come back in different intervals so that members can have a look at it before it's complete, that would be great. So I am just going to go to recommendations on this report. So we've been asked to note the current position of pupil outcomes and system trends across Sheffield, acknowledge the areas of strength and the key challenges identified, endorse the continued system-wide focus on improving outcomes for vulnerable learners, request a further report setting out progress against these priorities, and agree the development of the education leaders across the system and education strategy. Do we all agree? Yes. Thank you very much. I am going to ask if you mind if we extend the meeting for 30 minutes because we are due to finish, but we have got 2 items left. These are really important items that officers have sat and waited to present, and I don't want them not to be heard today. So, are we all in agreement with that? Thank you. Well, we'll see how we go. Thank you. So, the next item on your agenda is agenda item number 12 on page 173, which is the risk outside the home strategy, and we've got Sally and Becky who have come to present today. Thank you.
Hi. So I have shared the reports with you, so I'm hoping that I can go through this fairly briefly for you so we can get to questions. So the presentation introduces our risk outside the home strategy and how we respond to harm beyond the home. Risk outside the home refers to harm that children may experience beyond their family environment, including in peer groups, schools, neighbourhoods, public spaces and online. It recognises that keeping children safe means understanding the wider context that they move through and working together to reduce risks in these places. We're broadening our safeguarding to include risks in the community, peer groups online and not just within the home. Our aim is to protect children wherever harm occurs through early identification, strong partnerships and a shared approach. Risks are increasingly happening outside the home, so we need a coordinated whole system response across services and communities. This reflects Sheffield's local context, including inequalities and risks such as exploitation, youth violence and online harm. Our approach is rooted in inclusivity, respect and anti-racist practice with children and families at the centre of our decision making. Sorry, I think I'm going along the slides in the wrong way, but anyway, I'm on slide 7 now. So the indicators of risk, they show the highlight the key signs that a child may be experiencing harm outside the home, helping us to identify the concerns in an early way. Next slide, please. And then this sets out why these indicators should lead to a clear safeguarding response, ensuring concerns are acted on consistently. This strategy should be seen as a starting point rather than an end point, as risks outside the home continue to change and emerge as we keep learning, listening to children and communities, and adapting our approach so that our response remains relevant, effective and rooted in partnership. And then I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Becky. Before I open to questions, I would really like to thank everyone who has been part of the engagement process prior to this being brought today. We've had partners from social care, from education, from South Yorkshire Police, the Youth Justice Service and voluntary and community sector organisations. I would like to thank the Sheffield Youth Alliance and lots of individuals from the voluntary sector who have been critical friends throughout this process to get us to this point. As Becky said, this is not the end point, this is the beginning, and this is about making sure that as part from this strategy we then come up with the plan on how we're going to implement and what this looks like. I don't know if anybody is more aware of risk outside the home and what that actually means, and we can send some information out for you, but it's about how we work in communities across sectors to create trusted adults to watch out for our children, to make sure that they aren't exploited in our communities or online. It is multifaceted, and there are lots of other ways that children can be exploited and be put at risk. And this is about really embedding that information, that knowledge and that support systems into our communities. And it's not a council document, it is not something that we own that is just ours. This is about working in partnership across Sheffield, because our commitment is that our children in Sheffield are not for exploiting, and we will be creating eyes all across our city to make sure that our children are safe. So have we got any questions or comments on this report? So Councillor Whittaker, Councillor Goddard, Councillor Mallinson.
Thank you for the report. Certainly lots of good work in the strategy, and I think it's really important to have a multi-agency approach. Not long ago I attended a Risk Outside the Home workshop, which was really, really good. And it certainly covered issues that I'd not thought of as being risks outside the home. So based on how the strategy is going, do we think that parents are supported to understand what potential risks outside the home are?
Yes, we continue to work closely with parents, and we're changing our safeguarding when children are subject to child protection, so that parents aren't feeling that this is their fault, that the harm is happening outside of the home, and in order to support them, and we're continuing to work in that way.
Sorry, if I can, yeah, you can come back, but if I can just add, we're also doing lots of early work. So prior to that, there being an issue, we have a community youth team that go out into communities and run sessions for parents, helping them to understand what exploitation or what grooming might look like, whether that be in person, online, signs to look out for, where to go, who to speak to. And I've attended one of those workshops, and if you've got any concerns in your communities, or parents are coming to you with concerns, if you speak to our community youth team, they can come out and put that course on in your community with your parents or in schools, because it's important to do work with children and young people to make them aware of what the risks are. But we all know that when we get teenagers, they stop telling us things, and as a parent, you often don't get much feedback. So we are trying to enable parents and empower parents so that they understand what they should be looking out for. So we do have a team, so if you've got any concerns, please let Community Youth Service know, and they'll come into your wards. Thank you. Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Goddard.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the report as well. We can all agree on the fact, we want to see all kids protected outside the home, boys, girls of all colours, religions, sexualities, socio-economic background, educational status, whatever. We want all kids to be protected the same. On page 178, it's 6.2. I just take issue with some of the wording that's used. It says, this proposal could affect some groups more than others because certain children and communities may face greater exposure to harm, poorer access to support, or additional barriers linked to inequality and discrimination. I guess my question is, given the use of the words could and may, I'm just wondering whether there's any evidence locally supporting the assumptions being implied in that section, or whether it risks overgeneralising vulnerability by ethnicity or other characteristics, and risks inadvertently overlooking children from communities outside of those mentioned in 6.2. In addition to that, whether any considerations were taken regarding vulnerabilities unique to children in care or young carers as well. Thank you.
I think one thing that's really important with the risk outside the home, and I think all elements of it is, it's a really dynamic risk, and in terms of different risks, different communities and different impacts. And I think that's why it's important not to try and be really specific. And it's more with understanding about changing risks. For example, previously when we're looking at risk outside the home, it might be things like criminal exploitation, but with changes in online world, we're looking at different demographics and that ever changing. And what we've got to really keep a really clear focus on is what differences are in communities, whether that is things like poverty, for example, and linking into the previous items, but also how we're understanding changes in communities, how that impacts. And absolutely a fantastic point about our children in care, and also children in care from outside of Sheffield that might live. So just so we're understanding what's out there and how things link together. And I think what's really important is about this not being a Sheffield-owned city council-owned strategy, because they're all our children, they're our communities, and how do we really build that resilience? So it is that we've got to continue looking at how risks change in different areas, and does that mean that we have to look at different responses, different ways of working? Because it's up to us to find ways to engage.
Can I just add on to that? So absolutely, it's a constant, dynamic, changing world around risk outside the home. I mean, we've just had the conversation about children not being in school, and if children are then online, more in their bedrooms, we know that the likelihood of pornography, all of that, so there's kind of all of these contributing factors which are playing into risk outside the home. And I suppose part of the the conversation we're having is how do we gather that information from yourselves as local elected members about what the risks are in your area, as well as the different community groups, and that we're working together to address it, because it changes. Because 10, 15 years ago, it was, you know, outside takeaways, issues happening and grooming happening and exploitation. That's not, you know, we've got license, we do a lot of work around licensing as well, so people are fully aware of that now. So it's there are different things happening all the time. So I suppose it is that, how do we understand what the issues are? I think what we also do is we link it to our thematic reviews, our reviews within our safeguarding partnership, and some of those issues that are coming out, for example, the youth violence thematic review shows an issue about how young men see themselves, also about potential bullying that happened in primary school. And so again, it's how does that then link into risk outside the home? So it's exactly the questions you're asking. And I suppose it's beholden on all of us as a community to try and make sense of that before other people make sense of it and exploit our children.
Thank you. Councillor Mellington.
Thank you, Dawn. I fully support this paper, but I've got sort of, I hope it isn't going off to on a tangent at all, but given the important need to safeguard children, what work is being done to ensure that services, parents, other stakeholders are not overly risk averse? Young people, particularly care leavers, can face a cliff edge at 18 and become incredibly vulnerable if they're not able to be independent. Young people should have a right to be as independent as appropriately possible in travel and activities. Parents and young people need to access to training and advice for this. This links to the prospective ban on smartphones for under 16s, who should have access to alternative positive activities, ideally as independently as possible. Would you agree that children are best protected by being taught and given independence and assertiveness appropriate to their age? And what work has been done in this area?
I think giving people that information to be able to understand what risks are. I think that what you're talking about is open conversations. That's really important, that allows parents and other professionals working with children to be able to talk about risk, to be able to understand and to be able to respond. And so that's some of the work that's been referred to before. So some of the things about information in schools, information that we're making sure is as accessible, and constantly revisiting that to make sure it's right. But really key to one of the things that we want to do as part of this strategy is understand what good materials are, what good resources are. So we haven't got parents, we haven't got schools, different people accessing something that might look like it does what you need, but that we're really clear about what that quality is and what that impact is, and being able to really start to build up that evidence base of how we are keeping children safe. And the part about having right conversations at the right time is critical. We don't want to be getting into that, I suppose, adultification space with information that's not age appropriate for, I assume, the children. So it is very much about how we work together to get that right and continually build and change with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it is recognised that children's services can be very, very risk averse, overly risk averse. I'm not saying do anything as age inappropriate, whilst adult services are very risk enabled, which isn't always a good thing because people are just left to their own devices and become very vulnerable as adults. So, you know, it is so important that schools and children's services focus on independence, a bit like travel training, independent skills, so that young people are assertive, are able to protect themselves, know where to go, know how to spot things, you know, so it's embedded and it's not seen as just, we've got to safeguard to keep them safe, which just ends up with them sitting in their bedroom where they're not safe because they're online.
Thank you, Councillor Mellington. I'd just like to add to that, as we said before, this is not a council document and this is not about the council or social care or education just doing their bit. This is about us working across communities with all of our sectors, including voluntary and community and faith sectors, to ensure that we are creating high quality spaces and places where parents feel it is safe for their children to go as well. Because if we can create trust in parents, because that's sometimes where the somebody referred something to me about snow plough parents that remove any risk from children, so that they don't come resilient and they're not empowered young people. So this is about us empowering parents through work with all of our sectors to feel that they are trusting us that the places and spaces where their children go are safe. In which case, then we can start, because right now, the bombardment of media, the bombardment of information that people get is creating a sense of that the world isn't a safe place to be. Well, actually, I'm not sure whether that's true. Yes, there is risk, there's always been risk, and we're not undermining the fact that bad things happen, but what we want to be able to do through this strategy, as we've said, is work with everyone to change the narrative and create safe spaces and places so that we can do exactly what you've just said. Parents feel confident that they can prepare their children for travelling, they can prepare their children for socialising, whether that be online or in the real world. But right now, I feel that a lot of parents don't feel trustworthy of the world, and what we want to do is, as part of this, is to change that as well. So I'll let you come back, and then Councillor Alston's later.
Thank you. The stats show that violent crime is dropping, not going up. The media would have you believe otherwise. It's important that the council works with the data, not with the media and the spin. I sort of, in my mind, I worry about the idea of safe spaces, because that sounds like they can only go there, they can't go there. You know, it is about enabling them to be able to interact with society in a safe way, you know, because society is fundamentally pretty safe. There aren't, you know, I heard someone asked some primary school students in Barnsley, you know, why they weren't allowed to go home on their own. Oh, because we get abducted. That was their answer. You know, it's just not true.
Thank you. Meredith?
Yeah, so this is very much about not saying, so I think what we clearly say the entire time is that actually all of us have taken risks, because that's how you become a fully functioning adult, and that is part of growing up. So we need to create a safety so that people can take risks. I mean, you know, we've talked about what risks we've all taken in our teenage years and how that's part of what you need to do. This is about something different, where actually that risk turns into something which is malicious and malevolent, and how do we support parents and other professionals to identify where that's happening and to create the right interventions, and also to prevent that. Some of that's really difficult to prevent because we don't have that ability to stop technology firms from allowing certain things on the system. But it is about how do we respond to that, how do we put that prevention in. There's some really good work that's taking place around POLED, which is the police working in this area with schools and providing curriculum. There's a lot of work that schools are doing about relationships and what healthy relationships, healthy sexual relationships look like, and all of that is helping challenge some of the things that have become an assumption for some children, which is part of the issues around risk outside the home. So it is about risk, and it is about managing that risk, but allowing people children to take risk as they should do to grow up.
Thank you. Councillor Alston.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this quite quick. There's quite a lot of proposed interventions on page 191, and they look good. They look really positive. What I'm trying to understand is how is this going to look from the perspective of the young person and that young person's parents. So for a young, say, 14-year-old who's worried that their friends are getting involved with unsavoury, shall we say, possibly verging criminal activity, and they want to keep out of it, how do we find that child? Who finds that child? Who directs them to the safe spaces? And if I'm that child's parent, how do I know who to go to? How will I be told where I can help my child find different activities, safer places? I just want to know how that feels to the people actually out there in the community.
I think by it being as Councillor Dale said, it's a whole strategy, so it's not just a social care strategy, it's an all strategy, and it's working with those communities so that people can go to their trusted adult, really, and they will know who to get in touch with. It's also about bringing services together so that we've not just got pockets of specialised services across the city, that we're working together and we're sharing that knowledge around risk outside the home so that we can all respond to that in an appropriate way. There's lots of work going on with our community youth teams, not just in schools but out in communities as well. They will go and sit in cafes and talk to people there. So we're really trying to look at how we reach those harder to reach families across the city.
I think the other thing I'd supplement to that is the youth. So it's not just us, it's about the Youth Alliance. We've got some sessions coming up where we're continuing to have the conversations about who's in what places. It links to the youth strategy, which the Youth Alliance are currently creating, because actually it needs to sit outside of the council, some of this. It absolutely should be held in communities and place. And I think as we get more sophisticated, it's about how we're using the local area committees as well to support with this work.
Thank you, everyone. I think we might have to go to 15:15. I'm sorry, guys, because we've got Sarah sat over there. But on this paper, then, can we note the strategy and support its implementation and agree that we'll get updates on it with partners? Is that okay? Thank you. That's a yes. Are we all right to carry on going? Great stuff. We're now on to, thank you so much to Sarah for sitting and waiting to the end of the meeting. This is a really important paper. This is our Youth Voice and Influence paper, and it will be Sarah and Steve that will be presenting today. Thank you.
Is it? I've got it.
Oh, can you pop your button on? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's better. I'm here today to provide an overview of the Youth Voice and Influence function. If we can go to slide 1, please. So, looking at... Oh, I've got... There we go. Thank you. To look at... So, Youth Voice is... What I do want to start by saying is that Youth Voice has been a key part of the majority that we've been speaking about this morning. And most of the agenda items, Youth Voice has been that golden thread through most of it. So I was asked here today just to show you a little bit about what Youth Voice is happening in the city. So I manage a service called Youth Voice and Influence, what sits within Community Youth Services. And I'm just going to take you through a few slides, and I won't be too long, so hopefully we won't be an extra 15 minutes, Chair. So all the work that we do is around ensuring that young people's voice is there to help us design better and more inclusive and more responsive services. We work directly with the council plan, city goals, belonging framework by ensuring that those young people feel heard, valued, and are able to influence decisions that affect their lives. Key example of some of the recent engagement, we had Sheffield Youth Cabinet elections, and 13,796 young people participated. They demonstrated their strong interest in civic participation, decision-making. All their key priorities have been then collated to see if there is a difference in what's important to the north of the city, to the south of the city, and each of those officers and LAC officers in all those 7 areas across the city know what their key areas are for their particular part and what young people are saying, and then that gives them a standpoint to grow that work. So what are young people saying? I think one of the most important aspects of Youth Voice work is helping us understand the real experiences, what their young people's concerns and what the aspirations of children and young people across the city is. Young people consistently tell us they want better opportunities, safer communities, positive activities, and real influence over decisions. At the same time, common concerns emerging through participation work include mental health and wellbeing, community safety, cost of living pressures, and inequality in access to opportunities. And I think these insights are really extremely valuable because they help shape our service planning, engagement approaches, and wider strategic priorities across the council. We're a very small service, I'll say that from the off. I say small but mighty because we do a lot of work, and like I say, we are citywide. We support a wide range of participation activity, and our core youth voices, youth voice groups are the Youth Cabinet, UK Youth Parliament, Young Ambassadors, Young People's South Yorkshire Police Advisory Group, and since April, all the care experience work has come into that as well, so that's Children Care Council, Speak Up Now for care leavers. We support consultations across all departments within the council who want to ensure that youth voice is key to that and it's just not a tokenistic add-on. We do provide young people who might want to, we train them so that they can sit on recruitment panels. They sit on youth grant funding panels, speak to Ofsted inspections and any strategic engagement activity. We have had some gaps in our staffing, and new staffing are starting in the next few weeks, which will especially help us to support our care experience work. We're also employing 4 young influencers who are 18 to 25, who are all lived care experience, who will be coming, and the first one starts next week, which I'm pleased to say, because it takes a while for the DBSs and everything to go through. And so we should, in the next few weeks, be back up to full capacity in the staff team, because obviously I need bodies on the ground to be able to ensure that we can get those young people's voices. During the summer, there's going to be a big recruitment drive, I suppose, a big push around bringing young people on board to support that care experience work, because sadly a lot of the staff who were doing that kind of work before have moved on, so it's a brand new area of work. But I have got a dedicated care experience youth voice worker who's half-time, who is starting a week on Monday, which will be amazing. The work we do enables those young people to move beyond being consulted to actively shaping services, policy and service design. We also like to celebrate young people because, you know, young people just blow us away constantly. So 3 years ago we started doing the Sheffield Youth Awards to celebrate the positive contributions that young people make in the communities and reinforce that message that young people are really valued within this city. Last week, Sending Voices, who are a group of young people with SEND, who report to the SEND Improvement Board, won a National Film Award down in London for their work on some of the animations to help adults in education settings understand life from their viewpoint. So, you know, they're doing some amazing stuff. Impact. The work's already making tangible difference. Young people have contributed to service design, influenced communication improvements, shaped engagement methods and informed citywide strategies. If I do send out a monthly update on all the work that we do within my service and also within Universal Youth Services, which is all the 46 youth sessions that go out across the city per week. So have a read of that because every month is really quite different and it's such a wide range of activity that is happening. Like I said earlier, youth participation in recruitment, inspection, a strength of that accountability and responsiveness within services. And, this ongoing work actually gives us that continual insight into emerging issues that are affecting young people and enabling services to respond more effectively to changing needs and priorities. Key example of that was safeguarding priorities. We started to do some work on that last year, and young people were saying, where is mental health? It wasn't there, they wanted it there, and we put it in and we responded to their voice immediately, which is fantastic. There are some challenges and opportunities, obviously, but I think the demand for the work continues to grow across the council with wider partners as well. The main challenges are capacity, because it is I've got a team of community youth workers, but Youth Voice is quite specialised to ensure that it's not tokenistic and we're not just ticking boxes. We want consistent engagement across all areas, and it's about trying to embed that co-production within not just City Council, but actually all our partners we work with. So I do a lot of advice and work with partners around sharing that good practice and coming up with things what might help them, so it's not such a drain on the team. I think elected members have a really important role in championing youth voice, and we've been very lucky so far, and especially people, especially on this committee, who support us in our events and engaging those young people in the local communities as well as the citywide events. And Youth Voice is just integral to Sheffield's strategic priorities and supporting that embedding of participation. So I just want to say, please get on board, and thank you, and any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. I will open up to questions, and then I've just got a couple of requests. So Councillor Mallington and Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you for that. I came into being a councillor with a lot of experience in schools, but no experience in sort of the youth side of things, and I have to say, just being blown away really over the couple of years I've been doing this with the work of your team. I understand I think you've got outstanding results from Ofsted and stuff. Not that that matters in the big scheme of things, but it does, doesn't it? But, it's just sort of trailbreaking, really. And a large part of it is the voice and influence, as in listening to young people, which is so important. I've just got a couple of requests for the committee, actually. Embedded somewhere in the document, there is a link to a community parenting film or video, which I just urge committee members to read. I don't know if that can be just sent out on an email to make it easy to access, because it's quite important, I think. And then the other thing is about how important these workers that have just been recruited are. These voice and influence workers, they're ex-care leavers, so they're straight out of the care system, but they're young adults, and they're going to be paid to do a job, which is to articulate the care leavers in the council and do some reverse scrutiny of the council and sort of, hold us to account, which is part of the reason why we're doing so well. It's a shame that there's been a gap, and I'm so pleased that it's starting again. So my second request for the committee is it would be really great to meet them as a committee, but maybe, obviously not in this formal setting, but maybe immediately before or after a committee meeting, we could arrange for them to meet us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's on my list of requests. Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
It's just a comment, really. I think that the team do a really important function, and I think certainly comes across how passionate they are about what they do. The best local area committee meetings, certainly in the North LAC, that we've had, the public meetings, are where we've invited young people along to engage in the meeting, to discuss issues that they've got, and they're by far the best meetings. I've attended quite a few Youth Voice events, and they're an absolute joy to attend, and all the work that goes into them with the team is really appreciated. So well done, the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So on that note, I have got a couple of requests for you, Sarah, if that's okay. So obviously the first one is, can you arrange for us, once you've got a full cohort of the new staff, for us to meet informally either before or after a committee meeting to welcome them on board? Could you also send out the video for the community parenting board as well? And then could you also make introductions to members of the youth cabinet and youth parliament members from our areas so that we can start to build a relationship with them? I mean, I think it would be really good because we do need to work really closely together. And on that note, I think I would like to propose that we hold an extraordinary meeting for young people, which is actually, we would be expected to attend, but is a youth takeover committee meeting. So I would like to propose that we have a workshop session with our young people from our Children in Care Council, from SUN, from Sending Voices, Youth Ambassadors, Cabinet and anybody, other young people that we want to work with, so that we can start to set an agenda with them, so they can look at what their priorities are, and then we will join them in a formal youth takeover meeting. This is not just going to be something where, you know, we're just going to invite them and let them play in the chamber. This is going to be an actual real meeting where they can hold us all to account, including officers, because they're very, very good at that. And so, yeah, I'd like to propose that we do that probably quite quickly, actually, if possible. So I don't know if we can get it at back end at summer holidays, maybe, or October half term, maybe, because I know some of them will be at school. So if we could do it maybe in October half term, give you a chance to get it planned and book the room. Would all members be in agreement for us to do that with our young people, so they can get a real sense of the system? Thank you very much. And that's it from me, really. So that brings us to the close of the meeting, other than the recommendations are to note the content of Sarah's report, to support continued embedding and participation across services, and obviously encourage elected members to engage with Youth Voice, which we're going to do. There's just one more request, Sarah, sorry, I forgot. Can you ensure that members get invites early enough to any events that our young people are doing, so that we can actually attend? Sometimes they just come a little bit late, and I know you're all very busy, and it just makes it difficult for us. I'd like to thank all members of committee today for attending in this heat, and you know, being so actively engaged and so involved. I hope for new members it's kind of set the scene as to how the meetings run. We might run over, but that's okay, because I need you all to make sure that you've been engaged and involved in the meeting. So look forward to our next meeting, which is on the 1st of September at 2 p.m. So thank you all very much. It might be a little bit cooler by then. Thank you. Was that resolved unanimously? Are we all in agreement? We're all noting? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. See, it's a bit hot now. I've got... Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank